need a short person prop down here. And a lumbar pillow.
Thank you.
Guys ready? Okay. The meeting will come to order. Welcome to this Monday, April 22, birthday, 2013 meeting of the Mercer Island City Council. Looks like we've got a full house this evening. Welcome. Deb, you going to call roll or Allie? Okay, it's Deb's.
Mayor Bruce Bassett.
I go last. Here.
We're trying to keep you on top of your toes.
All right, here.
Deputy Mayor Dan Gross.
Here.
Councilmember Debbie Bertlin.
Here.
Councilmember Jane Braun.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Ciro.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Grady.
Here.
And Councilmember Tana Sen.
Here.
Okay, thank you. We have an item of special business to begin with this evening. So we didn't really talk about exactly how we're going to do this, but we have two utility board members who have been long serving, and tonight we get the opportunity to recognize their years of service. So maybe Rob and Dave, could you guys come on down so you're visible to the world? Come on out.
Okay.
So this is an opportunity for the council to say thank you to you, and I'll tee this up. I have a few comments here. I will say, just let me go through these. So Rob, you joined the board, I understand, in 2001. Is that correct? And Dave in 2005?
Correct.
So they both have been very long-serving, long-suffering members of one of our really, in many respects, I think it's our most important board, because it's the one that engages heavily with taxes and utility fees and serves a very important purpose in our community. They have both served capably as chairman of that, as well as serving on it, and have done a great job for us. They've been effective advocates for replacing and improving the city's utility infrastructure in an affordable and sustainable way. They've worked diligently to balance the funding needs of the utilities with the desire to protect the island ratepayers from all but the most necessary of increases. And their many accomplishments with the utility board include making the sewer lakeline project a top priority and getting that done under budget, creating modern financial policies for the utilities, making the emergency well a top priority for the water utility, and after careful analysis, recommending that the city not join the Cascade Water Alliance. And finally, supporting recycling, water conservation, and a variety of other utility sustainability initiatives. So I want to say a deep thank you to you both. I served as the liaison to the utility board some time ago and was very impressed by the work that body did, and as the leadership of that, you set the tone and did a great job for us. So thank you both very much. I know your shoes will be very difficult to fill, but we will, speaking to the rest of the public now, we'll be looking for replacements for the utility board as well as other positions, and would welcome all comers who would be interested in putting applications in for that. Tana is the liaison. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. I'm the current liaison to the utility board, and I have to say, when I started, you gentlemen really, I walked in and everything was happening in motion, things were in order, and you could tell that your experience and your leadership were very valuable to the utility and to me personally, and I kind of can't imagine the utility board without you both. So despite my best efforts, you are still leaving the board. So, and thank you I really want to thank you for your service. You guys have been amazing.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Anyone else? Mike?
Well, I think the public should all give them a huge round of applause, because when you go to compost, when you go to recycle, when you are saving water and energy and everything else, these guys are the ones that are responsible, because prior to Bruce getting on the board, I had the pleasure to serve with you two fine gentlemen. And you guys really look well into the future. You've postured the community well, and we are very grateful for all that you've done. So thank you very much.
All right, anyone else? Okay. Would you like to speak? Time for a speech, if you'd like to give us one.
I'm not going to give a speech. I'm just going to say thank you to the city staff, because while you may have worked us hard, we passed the ball along to all your city staff, and Glenn and his staff have done a great job of responding to our questions and giving us different options to work for, because we had them do it time and time again as we looked at different options. And I'd like to say thank you to a great city staff that assisted us over the last 8 to 12 years.
Dave and Rob, on behalf of the staff, it hasn't been a budget process that has happened where my staff comes back to me and says, this utility board rocks. You guys, as you know, it's a ton of data. There are hard issues to figure out. You have to look out over many years and a lot of dollars, and they've always felt like they've been on the same page with you guys, and it's made their jobs way easier. So I thank you on behalf of the staff.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Rob, any...
I was going to say a lot of water has flown through the pipes over the last 12 years, but as Dave said, we couldn't have accomplished all of the projects with this city without the fabulous staff that we worked with, and we really want to thank you for that. It's been an honor for both of us, and honestly, it's an honor for all of us that serve on the utility board. It's a great part of helping this city run in a very efficient way and looking for the future. But anyway, we thank you for that.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
We move now to appearances. And this is the time when you may address the council on any issue of interest to you. You have 3 minutes to do that. Please come up, state your name and address for us. We had that language. We forgot to bring that language. Don't disparage us. We don't like it. That's the general gist of it. And with that, we will go ahead and launch, and if other things come to my mind, I'll bring them up then. So, you're on. Thank you.
My name is Cornelia Schneider. I live at 8541 East Mercer Way. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about common sense gun legislation. I'm a member of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. We have five straightforward common sense solutions, and I'd like to list them quickly. 1, ban assault weapons and ammunition magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. 2, require background checks for all gun and ammunition purchases. 3, report sales of large quantities of ammunition to the ATF and ban online sales of ammunition. 4, make gun trafficking a federal crime with serious criminal penalties. And 5, counter gun industry lobbyist efforts to weaken gun laws at the state level. Since becoming active in Moms Demand Action, I've observed a pattern of fear within our community. A very, very large number of moms on Mercer Island are in complete agreement with our common sense solutions. But they tell us that they are afraid to become involved. They say, aren't you afraid of what might happen? Look at who your opponents are. One of our members, a single mom with 2 small children who lives on Bainbridge Island, recently wrote a letter to the editor of her local newspaper. She has since been targeted and frightened to the point where she is afraid to speak up. She said, I'm frightened. I need to lie low. This Saturday, I attended a vigil and rally at the Olympia State Capitol. Topic, gun violence. Men were carrying weapons, openly carrying guns. They circled our group around and around like buzzards. They were trying to bully us into being quiet. Last week, I received permission from the Mercer Island School District to post a flyer about this Olympia rally in the teachers' lunchrooms. Most of our schools welcomed the information. Two of the elementary schools, however, told me that it was unlikely that this flyer would be posted for the teachers. When I asked why, I was told that it was just too hot a topic. They were afraid, and rightfully so. But we must not let the bullies quiet us. We must not let them quiet us.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, that's the other one. Please, sorry. We do ask as a matter of policy that you please hold your applause or boos for the speakers, and it's just part of our process of trying to remain neutral on what folks are saying. So, if you could.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Margot Riblitz-Hauser. My address is 2429 66th Avenue Southeast here on Mercer Island. In the months since the Sandy Hook massacre, I have come to a new and unwelcome realization. I am no different than those Sandy Hook parents. What happened to them could happen to any of us. I imagine how lost and angry I would feel. How would I even be able to go on living? My life changed that day. The happiness I feel of being a mother was suddenly cast in shadow. Our children are no longer safe at the mall, at the movies, in their first grade classroom. Did you know that since 1980, close to 1 million people have died from gun violence? This is a matter of public safety. But there's light, and I am not alone. Mothers from all over the country, from both political parties, are uniting and organizing to become one loud, clear voice calling for change. I have joined a group called Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. It was formed the day after Newtown. As of today, we have 90 chapters in 40 states, and they're growing exponentially in light of last week's Senate refusal to adopt any type of gun safety legislation. Our local chapter has grown by 48 members so far this month alone. We're rallying on the steps of government buildings. During our children's nap times and our lunch breaks at work, we are writing letters, calling, emailing, and tweeting federal and state legislators and continuing to ask them to support concrete steps to prevent gun violence. Though I have never considered myself an activist, being part of this incredible moms network has empowered me to speak out for what I believe is right. No one should be able to purchase a gun without first submitting to a background check. Did you know that in our state, no permit or owner license is required to own a handgun or a long gun? There is no valid reason for any American citizen to need a weapon designed to kill hundreds of people in mere minutes. Did you know in our state there is no assault weapon law? That it is legal to openly carry a loaded handgun or a long gun in public anywhere? Did you know that in our state there is no training requirement for obtaining a concealed carry permit? Did you know our state law does not allow restrictive gun laws at the local level? There is a lot of work to be done right here at home. I can no longer sit and wait for the next massacre to happen. I must be a part of the solution. I will never be able to forgive myself if I don't at least try. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Eileen Benhoff, and I live at 3460 77th Avenue Southeast here on Mercer Island. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm a mom of a 3- and a 5-year-old, and I moved to Mercer Island because of the schools and because of the community, and I love living here. But December 14th changed my life. And I'm sorry to get emotional about it, but I heard something that made me join Moms Demand Action, which is that there's a wide gap between those who prioritize gun rights and gun control when it comes to political involvement. Nearly a quarter of those who say gun rights should be the priority have contributed money to an organization that takes a position on gun policy, compared with just 5 of those who prioritize gun control. People who favor gun rights are also about twice as likely as gun control supporters to have contacted a public official about gun policy. And it's one of the reasons I joined the Mom Demand Action, and I love what their goal is. I'd like to just give you some gun violence data, and I have copies of this if you'd like it. But the United States has about 283 million guns in civilian hands, and each year about 4.5 million firearms are sold, and 40% of those are done without background checks. Unfortunately, the percentage of American households with a gun has been steadily declining from a high of 54% in 1977 to 33% in 2009. However, the average number of guns per gun owner has increased from 4 in 1994 to 7 in 2004. And more than 30,000 people are killed by firearms every year in this country. A third of them are under the age of 20. And homicide is the second leading cause of death among 15 to 24-year-olds, and the primary cause of death among African Americans of that age group. If you compare this with other countries, in Japan, less than 50 are killed yearly by homicide. Germany, Italy, France, less than 150. Canada, less than 200. The United States, 10,000. Every time a gun injures or kills in self-defense, one is used 11 times for suicide, 7 times for criminal assault or homicide, and 4 times in an unintentional shooting, death, or injury. And this impacts our society in many ways. Medical costs, costs of the criminal justice system, security precautions such as medical detectors, reductions in the quality of life because fear of gun violence. U.S. lifetime medical costs for gunshot injuries is an estimated $2.3 billion. And U.S. taxpayers pay it for almost half, $1.1 billion, or 49% of lifetime medical costs for gunshot injuries. And I could go on and simplify everyone, but I will stop. And again, I have copies of that if you would like it. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you'd like, you could give a copy to the clerk, and she will distribute it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dave McCann. I'm a resident of the island for the last 6 months, and I appreciate the 6 years, sorry. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight to the council and that you've put this on the agenda. I'd also like to thank the council that a couple of weeks ago you had a meeting with the school district where you actually reviewed safety in the schools. I've been an American resident. I'm a US citizen. I've been here 25 years. I've never come and talked to a council before. And I have a daughter on the island who's a pupil in an elementary or middle school. My wife's a teacher here. And I had to look at this as a parent. I'm not a mom, I'm a dad. And I looked at this as a parent, and really I think the council here has a moral obligation to take a leadership role. Wharton talks about leadership. Wharton School of Management says 20% of the population leads, 10% lag, and 7% follow. And Mercer Island is one of 200 cities in the state of Washington. And we're not going to solve guns at a federal level, and really this is a problem of mental illness. I had a great chat with Mike. We're really talking here about the safety of our community. And Mike, I'm here tonight because I don't want Mercer Island to be the next Sandy Hook. 6% of all populations have mental illness. Britain, Germany, France, America, Canada, everybody has 6% mental illness. There's 1,000 people on this island that are probably under medication for mental illness. Long-term depression, American Psychiatric defines it as 2 years under medication. If you get the mentally ill adjacent to guns, you inevitably get situations that are unpleasant. Our job is we'll never wipe that out. So the question is, how can you as a council serve me as one of your citizens? I would ask that this council vote tonight to join Mayors Against Illegal Guns. It's a body of influence, and the only way we're going to make ourselves safe in this state is by legislating at the Olympia level. You can't legislate in the city, and nothing will happen at the federal level. So your obligation to me, I believe, as a citizen, and what my ask of you tonight, and there's a bunch of us here who have joined as a group together on the island, is we ask of you that you join Mayors Against Illegal Guns. It's a very reasonable set of positions. 900 mayors in the country have embraced it. And we're going to have to go back to Olympia again in January of next year because 5 representatives on the House this year blocked a safety movement, safety law that went in 2 weeks ago. And unless the cities like Mercer Island lead this state, we'll just keep talking about it. Meanwhile, 2% of the US population are members of the NRA. And 80% of the population, when surveyed, want gun safety at gun shows. So I think you have a moral obligation to your citizenry to question how can you as a mayor and a council represent your citizenry at Olympia. I think your first step is to join Mayors Against Illegal Guns. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kevin Peck. I'm proud to be an Islander. I reside with my family at 6825 84th Avenue Southeast, which is directly across from the back of the South End QFC, where we've lived for the last 14 and a half years. And I've been honored to be a member of this group of Islanders that have been meeting to push for gun safety. I have 2 teenagers. One's graduated out of the school district and in college. One's still in high school. So I'm concerned for my children's safety, the safety of their teachers, the school staff, the safety of their friends, the safety for our whole community, including our first responders. Now, I grew up in a community in Wilmette, Illinois, which is very similar to Newtown, Connecticut, which I think are both very similar to Mercer Island. So I want to prevent tragedy by asking you to join this coalition of mayors against illegal guns. Every day in the United States, 33 people are murdered by guns, and by my math, that comes out to every 1 hour, 37 and a half minutes, someone is murdered by a gun. So in preparation for my talk tonight, I took an investigative field trip yesterday. I went to a local sporting goods store in Bellevue, and I inquired about buying a weapon. In response, I was asked, how much damage did I want to inflict? And I was told if I had a Washington State driver's license and no felony, they could put the weapon in my hands in 20 minutes. And basically, I left the store shaking. By my calculation, a student at Mercer Island High School that has a car could drive to that store during the lunch break, buy the weapon, and be back in the school without missing a class. And I think it's scary, and it basically shutters all potential reality in terms of what could happen in our high school or other schools. I've also practiced law for 30 years. A substantial portion of my practice is criminal defense, so I've seen that devastation that guns can bring upon victims, but I also know that many of the defendants charged with crimes would not have committed those crimes had guns not been easily accessible to them. So I'm joining with my fellow citizens here. Please join the coalition. I don't think it's a political issue. I don't think it's an economic issue. I don't think it's a family issue. Basically, it's an issue of public health and safety. And I don't think we can wait essentially another hour, 37 and a half minutes for anything to happen, so please join tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, John Hanlon, 7406 92nd Place Southeast, Mercer Island. And I wanted to first start off in saying that a right defined by political whim is not a right. I recognize a right to defend my family and my property, and that's a non-negotiable item. Guns, while an imperfect instrument, are the single best mechanism to ensure that right. An organization like MEG, founded by people who have the luxury of armed protectors 24/7, and no legal skin in the game, have no business or jurisdiction in matter of my choices. They can go to hell. To be clear, I am a person with no criminal history other than a speeding ticket more than 5 years ago. I've worked in very security-sensitive fields, many background checks across different levels to achieve that, and I seek to abide in law, respect life, and have no desire to bring harm to anybody. However, I'm not going to surrender, support, or accept any restrictions on my God-given rights which precede the construction of this country. MEG is an anti-liberty organization. Mercer Island should not consider any association with this organization. The council does. I personally pledge my time and money to defeat those elected individuals who vote in favor of such measures. I would like to also, there's been a lot of information that isn't backed up by facts. You can see that it's largely an emotional topic, and I think one of the other things that I really want to bring to it is understanding what are the facts in this thing. There are more drownings in this country than there are children killed by guns. And if we're on an island, maybe that should be a higher priority. I think the risk aspect is actually higher. And so there's not the high-profile issues, while horrific, aren't actually representative of the true risk and the true net benefit to society by making restrictions that are undefined. And I think that's really the key thing here is what they're asking for. Require every gun buyer to pass criminal background check. So one of those questions is, well, what does that mean? Because actually the problem with most of this stuff is, what does it actually mean to do these things? It's one thing to say it, and it sounds great, and I appreciate the emotional, guttural response to do something positive, but what does it mean to pass a criminal background check? Who decides what those rules are? How do I maintain proof that I've actually passed a criminal background check at any point in time if at some point in time somebody inquires? Who is inquiring of that? Military-style assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, generally speaking, they suffer from the common flaw that a cosmetic difference can make all the matter in the world. I can have a much higher-powered standard hunting rifle And if I change a few aspects on it, mostly plastic, and make it into a black one, or I get the can of Krylon out, now all of a sudden it's starting to look like an assault rifle. And if you really understand the true nature of these things, gun trafficking is a federal crime. I think we started the federal government and demand more answers about what is moving between our border when it comes to allowing illegal guns to transit into Mexico. So what these guys are asking for... Oh, sorry, I didn't see my light. But I think you get my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Bruce. Members of the council. Mike Jacobson, 4840 86th Avenue Southeast. I've been a Mercer Island resident for 16 years, 4 kids through the school systems here. I'm a big consumer of the school product here on Mercer Island, and I'm here to urge you to throw your support to authorizing Bruce to join Mayors Against Illegal Guns. I want to talk about 3 things. First, about organization. Second, I want to ask you to talk about sensible regulation that assures that it's law-abiding citizens, like my neighbor who just spoke, who are the people who possess weapons, not people who don't meet the criteria to possess weapons. And I want to talk to you about other sensible regulations of our rights. So Mayors Against Illegal Guns. It's a high census, highly organized, well-defined organization with clear mandates and clear aims, and signing on with that group will put you in the mainstream of well-thought-out positions on making sure that it's law-abiding citizens who possess weapons rather than persons who are not qualified to possess weapons. I think the influence of throwing your weight behind Mayors Against Illegal Guns will give Mercer Island some clout to go to Olympia and influence the debate on sensible regulations for firearms. The second thing is this is Mayors Against Illegal Guns. It's a position statement to keep the guns out of the hands of criminals, out of the hands of mentally ill persons, out of the hands of people who are court-adjudicated threats to their family members or their neighbors of violence. So what are the sensible regulations? Well, I don't think anybody's going to come here tonight, even, and I think my neighbor who just spoke before me would agree, to argue that I'm perfectly able to commit violent acts and possess a firearm. I'm perfectly able to threaten my family and my neighbors with violence and still possess a firearm. I'm perfectly authorized and in my rights to be found mentally unstable by a mental health professional and possess a firearm. You have these 3 attributes, you should surrender the possession of a firearm. I have no more right to possess a firearm and commit violent acts and threaten my neighbors with violence and establish mental instability than I have to come to this government meeting to petition the government and create an uproar and a riot here, or phone in threats, or yell fire in a crowded theater. I mean, you people are all going to stand behind my constitutional First Amendment rights to speak to you and with all the force that you can muster, but none of you are going to wince at the fact that there are sensible regulations that where public safety is going to be impacted, you're going to stop that constitutional right. And that's what Mayors Against Illegal Guns is doing in the context of the Second Amendment. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Liz Callahan. I live at 4031 96th Avenue Southeast. I think the last time I addressed the council was about 12 years ago when I was asking for money to be able to fund the building of the playground in Mercerdale Park, which is a great community asset. And I think as a former PTA president and a community fund board member and a school volunteer, I just want to thank you for the time that you spend to be able to create a community here and to work on behalf of our citizens. And I think this is an issue, as we talk about gun safety and we talk about public safety, the council really has to take seriously in the context of the quality of life to create here on the island and the role that this community has in being able to act as a lightning rod for opportunity for change in our country. I think we've all got to sit back and look at the events, not only of Sandy Hook and of the many tragedies that preceded it, but the last few months where we've continued to see these violent acts committed as a result of illegal handguns, illegal weapons, and take stock of where we stand. And I think we've all got to sit back and say, you know, we cannot accept the status quo. We cannot accept to see the funding on the pro-gun manufacturer side that just continues to infect our elections, our legislation, and our continued tolerance of an escalation of this weaponry. So I do ask, in the spirit of public safety, that the council and Mayor Bassett strongly give your recommendation to stand with 19 other communities here in Washington, in 19 other cities who have joined Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and to stand behind the platform that's going to help work on getting better and stronger enforcement on illegal guns, on limiting the capacity of certain types of weapons, on getting military-style weapons off our streets, on holding those people who are irresponsible gun owners, holding them accountable, holding irresponsible gun dealers accountable for their complicity in this public safety issue. And to really focus on the technologies and the systems to be able to better trace guns and better track weaponry that's coming into our state, into our country. You know, my neighbor spoke to the rights of citizens to protect themselves and the rights to be able to live a certain way. Our communities and the fabric of our society is we've accepted curbs on our individual rights when it comes to things like seat belts, motorcycle helmets, specifically the fencing of swimming pools on private property. You know, it may be my right for me to protect my children around the swimming pool and the potential drowning risk on my property, but we've accepted curbs of that for the good of the greater society and to protect populations that can't speak for themselves. So I ask you, please stand against the status quo and join Mayors Against Illegal Guns.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Cove.
I have a 4-page version. I'll stick to the page version. This weekend I spoke to several senior law enforcement officers from the area, not Chief Holmes. And they were unanimous in saying that this subject, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, was not one that should be addressed by the Mercer Island City Council. Part of the reasoning was any such action produces a blowback, and also that it's a very complex issue, as you well know, and it doesn't lend itself to a simplistic or bumper sticker type of approach. I shared this conversation with a prominent member of the council who said, in effect, well, don't worry, Carv, it's not an official act, and it's just a sense of the council. It doesn't matter much. Well, if it doesn't matter much, I don't think we should even be considering it. Mayors Against Illegal Guns is more than just a position against illegal guns. It also seeks to redefine what is in fact illegal. Interestingly, in Saturday's Bloomberg magazine, an article not written by the mayor said it was no surprise that the measure meaning gun control in the Senate was defeated as, to quote, libertarian reflexes are returning to America. Individual rights weigh heavily. And I often look to foreign observers to see the sense of America. And I don't go back to Tocqueville, but good example. This is from the Lexington column in this Saturday's Economist. Again, addressing the failure of the gun rights or the gun restriction law in the Senate. It says, perhaps the underlying reason is that America is suspicious of notions of perfectibility, especially from the state. The idea that horrible events are a sign of a flawed civilization or that bad things need addressing with collective constraints is alien to the national psyche. In America, for good or ill, horrors are an unreliable way to force change.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening. My name is Don Schifrin. I've been an island resident, Rich, for 16 years. My wife is a lifelong islander. I live at 4317 Forest Avenue Southeast. And I've been a pediatrician on the east side since 1977. When I became a pediatrician, I was fighting things like cancer, infectious diseases. And what we did as pediatricians, and I've testified, this is the first time I've testified before council, I've testified at the state level for automobile safety restraints for children. Not a popular issue. Took us 3 years. I've testified for restraint systems and personal flotation devices. That took us, again, 3 years. So there's an inherent resistance to doing things that statistically would be the best for kids, that would put kids first. And statistically, I never thought that after 35 years, I'd look at a statistic that says that guns kill twice as many children in the United States as cancer, and about 5 times as many as heart disease, and 15 times as many as infection. Well, that's a statistic. And children now are acceptable losses. Unfortunately, in America, we have a gun culture. We're not going to change that. We're not going to take 260 million guns out of circulation. But this is something that talks about gun safety. And children are inherently an appropriate vehicle to look at this. How do we treat our children? Are they acceptable losses? How do I look at a mother, and I've done this, and talk to her about a gun that was discharged in her house by a family member that killed another family member? This happens more often than you might think. And this is a devastating loss, just like losses in Boston or Newtown. And we have the ability to do something about it, but it's political will. Whether it's a moral imperative depends on who you are and what you value. And if we value our nation's children, and I think we do, then we owe it to them to look at these statistics and say, how can we make life safer for them? Whether it's going to school, whether it's riding the bus, whether it's not imbibing alcohol, whether it's not taking drugs. As parents, we will do what it needs to be done to protect the emotional and physical security of our children, and we expect our government to at least come up to that level. So tonight I'm making an appeal on behalf of children. The American Academy of Pediatrics has got about 65,000 members nationally. And basically we're saying put kids first. Think about kids when you make these decisions, because those decisions will echo and the ripple effect will be significant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Callum McCann. I live at 8182 West Mercer Way, and I'd just like to offer a high schooler's opinion. I'm currently a senior at Mercer Island High School, and the thought that someone can actually leave in the 35 minutes that we have for lunch, drive to Bellevue, pick up a weapon, come back in, and actually commit a violent crime against other students is horrifying. I know there are mental problems that actually go around high school students, that people actually have these mental problems. Students at my school have these mental problems. And the fact that they can achieve or acquire these weapons is terrifying. And just to offer a high schooler's opinion, it's scary sometimes to go to school when you hear about these events, when you hear that students at Newtown and other schools have been shot up and they've died, basically. It's scary. I also worked at a theater right after the Batman shootings, and the environment there was horrifying. People actually, for the first time, I had worked there for 3 weeks before that, for the first time, nobody really showed up because they were so scared. And I think that the council and Mercer Island needs to step up and do something to take back and, to try and help that atmosphere of terror that's surrounding us currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Suraj Kathari. I preside at 2423 84th Avenue, Southeast. Excuse me, I'm cold. I'm also a senior at Mercer Island High School, and I was concerned about this piece of legislation. This morning in Math 126, we had a quick talk on risk analysis and weighing two sides and weighing the pros and cons of each side. And I thought about this issue at hand, and I thought a little bit about the risk analysis I just learned this morning. On two sides, we have one side that states that we should stop the illegal, have people who should obtain guns illegally. We should prevent this from happening. And then on the other side, the NRA states that instead we should actually enable someone to come to the school and actually protect us with a gun themselves, somewhat like a security guard, I believe. Now, what they failed to think about, I believe, from a student's perspective, is the psychological toll that this would have on the Mercer Island student, or given any student in any community. I know that we have police officers at our school, but the idea of having another security guard at our school would detract from the educational value of the system itself. The institution's focused on preparing us for future endeavors that we have, entrepreneurs or whatever, and when you walk between class to class, as you see these security guards, it makes you pose a question to your own security, whether you're safe where you are, and it makes you constantly stray your focus from school itself. From a basic risk analysis perspective, it doesn't seem like this is a very viable option from a student's perspective. On the flip side, you have doing background checks on people who may be mentally unstable. While you look at the pros and cons of this side, you see that people who are interested in going out hunting and people who are interested in self-defense may still own a weapon and preserve the right to do so. At the same time, you're stopping people who may be mentally unstable, maybe a kid who's having a tough day or a tough week or a tough month, from going out, purchasing a gun, and coming back and using it against their own will or against the will of other students, my teachers, and my fellow friends. So as a student from Mercer Island High School, I'd like you to take in consideration this piece of legislation and join this group. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Sabina Prekathari. I'm a junior at Mercer Island High School, and I live at 2423 84th Avenue Southeast. I researched this topic because I was introduced to this issue by two very wonderful people, and after learning about it, I was completely shocked. My initial perception was that guns cannot be removed, so why try to change things? But after researching it, I have learned that these gun safety bills that have been trying to pass are really quite sensible. I understand that the biggest argument against it is that people feel as though their Second Amendment right is being taken away. However, this is not the message that I've been hearing. What I've been hearing is that people do not want to take away other people's guns. The Second Amendment gives people that right. However, people just want to make it safer so that individuals who are mentally unstable or not fit to have a gun should not be able to purchase one. Second of all, when I just heard about the bill that was trying to be passed in Congress and did not pass, 46 senators rejected the bill. And I was wondering why. We elected them and we trust them with our vote. However, from what I read, 42 of those senators were being funded by the NRA. I was completely disappointed to hear this, and I do have faith in the system, and I do have faith that our politicians will make the right decisions to protect our safety. I understand that people are scared when it comes to this issue. However, I think that that does not compare to the fear of those who are facing a situation where there is a gun and they are not able to protect themselves. As a high schooler, I feel this fear, and I hope that you guys do something. And I urge Bruce Bassett, the mayor, to please join Mayors Against Illegal Guns. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. My name is Sue Stewart, 3205 84th Avenue Southeast. Take a deep breath. I'm talking on a completely different topic.
It's not Agenda 21, is it?
I want to wish everyone here Happy Earth Day. The proclamation made me feel proud that I live on Mercer Island. The city has done and is doing a lot of great things. We're a community particularly interested in our parks, and I joined the Giraffe Club and stuck my neck out a few years back to preserve a park, Upper Luther Burbank, from 20 to 60 homes. I don't know anyone except Rich that was maybe sitting among you at that time. But anyway, during the master plan process in 2005 and 2006, citizen input kept Luther Burbank Park as a nature park. About 150 people came to every event, and although some development elements came into the master plan's written process, it's basically remained undeveloped. There is now talk and money being spent to consider a performing arts center within the parameter of the master plan. The P-patch has been verbally mentioned by a couple of council members, but it was not really in the minutes of the last minutes that I read on the web. But the P-patch is part of the original forward thrust park bond that was part of the original Luther Burbank Park that was given to the city. And that P-patch has been there for 30-plus years. And the people in this community, they're in the audience tonight, if they'll raise their hands, they're the best Earth Day enthusiasts you could ever meet. And we invite you to visit it, to see what it's about, and to really value it. We would urge against any consideration of development there, and hope that it goes under a lot more review when it comes up in June. The other thing I'd like to mention is development on the upland area by the community center would also create a lot more traffic and erosion and so forth. And one of the things that I haven't taken the time to come to you to talk about is that for the last 5.5 years, this will be our 6th summer, a master birder Audubon person, Judy Roan, and I have recorded the birds that have been in the wetlands. We now have 90 species of birds that come to the wetlands at Luther Burbank Park, and that's something to really celebrate. We have aided in getting grant monies for both the Parks Department and Mountains to Sound, and they've done wonderful work to make that a healthy place. So anyway, I urge you not to build on the Luther Burbank Master Plan area as this comes up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joan Franklin. I live
Welcome.
at 9228 Southeast 33rd Place. And although I'm certainly in support of gun control, I'm here to also talk about Luther Burbank and the P-patch. I've been an island resident for over 30 years. I'm a parent of 3 children, and my own children certainly enjoyed the benefits of Youth Northwest Theater. And so though I support maintaining that structure somewhere on the island, I think it's really incumbent on all of you to be careful to not pit one community against the other. I now have the set-up chance to be a senior. I see this from a different point of view. Many of my colleagues in this community, this is our home. We go to the P-patch at least twice a day. Many people I hear don't even know that we exist. This is a vital part of our life. As we applaud sustainability, I can tell you that we personally share our produce and our flowers with our friends in our community. It is important that we maintain this P-patch. And so I guess as I'm asking, wearing a different hat and no longer having a parent of young children, I think it's important as you ask for our support for things like school bonds, things like helping build community theater, that you don't pit seniors, we're not all seniors, but a lot of us are, that we're not pitting seniors against parents of children. I want to feel that this is a community that supports all of us, no matter what stage we're in. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Betsy Franklin, and I'm married to the previous speaker. We live at 9228 Southeast 33rd Place, and I'm essentially a lifelong Mercer Islander who grew up here. And I also certainly understand the importance of the gun topic that most people talked about. I happen to be a pediatrician, and I want to echo my colleague, Dr. Schifrin, who talked about the importance of that for children. So I'm wholeheartedly in support of having the mayor join that group. But I come to talk tonight about the P-patch, and just wanted to speak as a P-patcher that's been around 5 to 6 years I've had a patch there, and want everybody to know how important it is in my life. I have a very stressful job, and I see the P-patch as kind of my antidote to stress, and I go there and it's peaceful and quiet and huge part of the quality of living on Mercer Island, and very, very important to me personally. I think I can echo what the other some of the other people I know that work at the P-patch. It would be devastating to me personally to have it taken over by a performing arts center. So that's point one. Point two is I don't understand why the city would support a private organization like the Youth Theater Northwest, which is important, as opposed to something that's public, like the P-patch. if it's a performing arts center, I don't understand why the high school couldn't be considered a performing arts center for the community. It's a very nice performing venue, and there's lots of places off the island, but there's nothing like the Pea Patch. And just want to make sure that you know that for people in the middle and older age group here, that's an important thing too. And children are important, but I think you have to balance. And Pea Patch is really important in my life personally. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Looks like we might be getting close to the end. Welcome, Tom.
Tom Emmerich, 6231 Parkside Lane. Agenda Bill 4830, addressing mayors against illegal guns, is seriously conceptually flawed, ineffective, inappropriate, unnecessary, divisive to the community, illogical, and bad public policy. It should not be adopted. Instead, if you're serious about addressing the value of human life or fighting crime on this island, spend your time instead supporting and discussing the real causes of this kind of trauma that we're all concerned about, like the breakdown of the family, ethics, values, the breakdown of parenting, untreated mental illness, and radical and extreme political action, and inadequate enforcement of existing laws that are at the heart of some of our trouble. You don't need another agenda bill to enforce existing law. Further, the 900 mayors involved here are simply as wrong as a 14th century majority supporting a flat earth. Their misguided attempt to keep additional specific kinds of firearms off our streets is not going to solve the problem. They clearly don't understand 5,000 or more years of human history, the elements of probability and risk, and the unintended effects of flawed public policy. Cell phone use while driving kills significantly more people each year than do guns, other than for suicide or for valid law enforcement use. Perhaps this agenda bill ought to be addressing banning cell phone use here on Mercer Island. Finally, if you're serious about criminal attacks and crime on Mercer Island, starting with a discussion of installing more recording video cameras at critical locations around the island, as we're very effective in bringing the Cambridge and Boston perpetrators swiftly to justice. Their institution alone here could serve as a significant deterrent to criminal activity in Mercer Island. In the meantime, Agenda Bill 4830 is a political grandstanding and pandering at its worst. It's the wrong approach to solve the wrong problem.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name's Tom Callahan. I'm at 4031 96th Avenue Southeast, and I'm the spouse of the, the Mercerdale Park person who talked earlier tonight. Pea patches are fabulous. I support those quite a bit. The Performing Arts Center is a wonderful thing. I don't know about putting a Performing Arts Center in the middle of a pea patch. That doesn't sound right to me. But I wonder, since Seattle Children's Theater has multiple theaters in the same building and ACT has multiple theaters contained within the same building, I wonder if it wouldn't be possible to have a Performing Arts Center here on the island that the high school drama program, the middle school drama program, and perhaps even Youth Theater Northwest and other folks who would want to use a Performing Arts Center might not be able to use collectively. However, tonight I'm here to talk to you about mayors against illegal guns. That's the reason I came down. All three topics are important, but that's why I'm here. It takes courage to lead. It takes courage to sit in front of a bunch of your fellow citizens and listen to what they have to say. It takes courage to join the military and put your life on the line every day, whether it's in the mess hall feeding people in a fairly secure base here in the United States or whether you're out on a front line somewhere. It takes courage to do that. It takes courage to stand here in front of the City Council and tell you my opinion and encourage you to do something that I believe is a good thing. I think that the council ought to join the Mayors Against Illegal Guns. I think those are very reasonable steps towards making our country a bit safer. Life is fragile. We in the United States tend to be lulled into a sense of security because we have joined together and agreed to abide by certain limitations Most of us drive on the same side of the road when we're going one direction. Most of us stop at stop signs. Most of us have agreed that some of these limitations on our freedoms make community work better. And in community, we actually have security and we have strength. Mayors Against Illegal Guns, I believe, addresses the outliers, the folks who have either chosen to ignore community or are incapable in some fashion of joining the community fully. So I thank you for your time, and I encourage you to join Mayors Against Illegal Guns.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome.
Larry McWilliams, 6020 86th Avenue Southeast. I'm here to speak against your proposal to join the mayor's statement. The previous gentleman made a slight slip, but I think he was accurate. He said mayors against guns, and then he said mayors against illegal guns. Well, I think it really is a mayors against guns, and they aren't really against any illegal guns. It wouldn't appear, because all the ones that they list are all legal. So I'm not sure exactly what it is. I think it's mostly hype. It's LinkedIn and blogs and media and Facebook, and you read something from somebody who is on their own completely out of nowhere that says everybody is saying, and everybody says, well, gosh, it must be true. It isn't true. We have a Constitution that says that we have the right to bear arms. It doesn't specify that you have to control them, but we know that you do. When you own firearms, if you are responsible, they need to be locked up and used in an appropriate manner. The magazine issue is hoo-ha. It takes 2 seconds, maybe 3, to change from one 10-round magazine to another 10-round magazine, and you've done the same thing that you can in 20-round magazine. Or you can tape them together, which I did for a job once, a long time ago. It's emotion, it's naive, it is... I enjoyed the students who were concerned that there might be a security guard on campus. That seemed to bother them more than having the resource officer on campus. We didn't get into a discussion of how many drug dealers they know around campus and how many have died as a result of drugs. We know what alcohol has done to some students in the past. That says maybe it's selective hate and not just against guns. I think that is really the attempt, is to disarm the country with the hype that the president offers. The media is right in there accusing the Republicans of destroying the bill in the Senate, and it was interesting that there were 4 Republicans that voted for the bill and 4 Democrats that came over and voted against. But the Republicans seem to get the blame for it. Thanks, Ms. Anderson and Channel 5. The information that was provided by some of the earlier speakers is wrong. The information that they provided is not accurate. You need to go to the facts and look at the Center for Disease and see what the numbers really are. We could also respect physicians. We could talk about medical malpractice for a while if we wanted.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Come on down.
Good evening.
Welcome.
I'm Jack Larson. I live at 8212 Southeast 64th Street. And you've heard a wide variety of opinions tonight, one way or the other. And you are the folks now who are going to have to show character. And do you have the strength of character to determine which way is going to be the best way for you to go to resolve this issue? The Second Amendment is on its way, is in trouble in this nation right now. And I'm wondering, Chief Holmes, how are we going to when we had the insurrection in Seattle, how are we going to protect Mercer Island?
So, a fair question to ask rhetorically, but I would ask that the chief not
That's fine.
respond.
This is a point, too. You know, Yamamoto never gave one thought to invading the United States in 1941. The reason he didn't was because he knew there was a gun in every home, at least one gun in every home. And he invaded China, Indochina, went all down that area because they didn't have guns. But at any rate, I just wanted to say that I support your hopeful decision to forego the Mayors Against Illegal Guns. It's not the guns who kill people, it's people who kill people, and we're not addressing that problem.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. With that, I will close public comments. Thank you. We move to minutes of our April 8th meeting, and I see we have a revised copy of those minutes here.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the revised version of the minutes from the City Council meeting on April 8th.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Consent calendar. We have payables, payroll, and Agenda Bill 4829, Utility Board Work Program.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Yeah. Any comment, Mike? You were moving for your microphone there.
No, go ahead.
Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Consent calendar carries. Excellent. All right, we move to the bill that everybody came to speak on and has left. So, Agenda Bill 4830, Mayors Against Illegal Gun Coalition. And I had a whole speech teed up here for the folks who were here but no longer are. Carl, you want to hear my speech? Not really. I welcome your honesty. Well, before folks left, I had 3 points I was going to make, and so bear with me, council members. The first point is, it is great to have people come to a council meeting and hear them say, I haven't been to a council meeting before, or I haven't been to one in 10 years, or I haven't been to one in 20 years. We welcome citizen engagement, and citizen engagement on all points of all issues is absolutely welcome. So we only hope that you will not only come out for this issue, but for other issues as well. And when board appointments are an option, as they are now, we would welcome your offering yourselves up for service in that way too. So please remain engaged, get engaged, remain engaged. We'd love to see that. Second point, you may be asking yourselves, probably ought to be asking yourselves, why is this issue before the council when this is a question for the mayor? It's mayors against illegal guns. It's not councils against illegal guns. The answer in this case is that we take the form of government which is the weak mayor form of government, which is, I guess, more correctly known as the council/city manager form of government. And so I am an appointee of this council, not a elected official directly from the public. I'm elected as a council member, but then become a mayor as at the discretion of this council. And therefore, it's our policy that I don't make decisions in the way that a strong mayor and a directly elected mayor would. It takes a vote of this council for me to take positions on things like this. So that's the reason that this is before the council rather than simply something that I would decide to do. As, for instance, Seattle has a strong mayor, so the mayor of Seattle would decide whether or not he was going to sign something like this without the discussion amongst council members. Third, and one of our speakers alluded to this, but I just want to point out we had a very good discussion at our last meeting with the school. It was a joint meeting of the council and school board. I think It involved a presentation by Chief Holmes, his commander, Dave Jokinen, our Youth and Family Services Director, Cindy Goodwin, and Schools Facility Manager, Tony Kuhn. What I took away from that is that we have an excellent relationship and body of work going on that involves both our city folks, our police force, and our Youth and Family Services folks, and the school district. I think we're doing, by all measures, a great deal of good with respect to safety in our schools and trying to work collaboratively with our school district and provide a safe environment here. This measure before us is really a separate thing. It was brought to us by citizens, at the urging of citizens. This is before us, and it clearly doesn't. We don't have the power to legislate here with respect to guns directly. So this is more whether we put our name to something that is a national issue. So with that speech done, I open us up to Agenda Bill 4830, Mayors Against Illegal Guns. There's no presentation. Council members, I leave it to you. Whoever wants to weigh in here, please do.
Can I make a motion then? I move to support the mayor in signing the statement of principle for the Coalition of Mayors Against Illegal Guns.
Second. Okay, I think Mike gets that. So we have a motion on the table. Now, discussion of the motion. Donna.
Sure. As a city council, we've agreed that our number one priority is public safety. And we have voted to add lifeguards back into our budget, for instance, this past time. And I think that it would make sense to continue in that realm with all the other public safety things we do to vote for, to join the Mayors Against Illegal Guns. Personally, for me, this is, real life, and this can be close to home. And I think sometimes we think of gun violence, we look at all the statistics, we talk about the statistics, but I just want to walk you through one real-life scenario so that you just kind of put that in your brain of, statistics of this side and that side, but really one thing that happened. So I was on the board of directors at the Jewish Federation in 2006 when there was a shooting, and one woman was killed and 5 critically injured. And when you look at the broader impacts of that, you can see that there are societal as well as the personal and financial impacts of gun violence. So I'm not going to get too emotional, but I wanted to run through. So the woman who was killed, Pam Wechter, was a former 22-year resident of Mercer Island who raised money for charity, was a mom and a friend to many here in the community and around the world, frankly. The surviving women underwent dozens of surgeries and countless hours of counseling. Thousands of hours of wages were lost and careers interrupted. Entire communities here and around the country were on high alert, and millions of dollars were spent on additional security measures. Hundreds of public employees, from first responders and medical professionals to lawyers and now correctional staff, were involved. Even though the crime was caught on video, it took 4 years and 2 trials, led by a Mercer Island resident as the prosecutor, to bring the perpetrator to justice. All this because of a single individual with malintent, mental illness, and access to guns. The Mayors Against Illegal Guns, I think, will take steps to bring important legislation that is not trying to take away people's guns. It is not to overturn the Second Amendment. It's to add safety measures, gun safety measures to prevent all of those other unintended consequences maybe, or intended consequences from happening from gun violence. And unfortunately, the incidents such as the one I described are not few and far between, as we all know. We don't need to list them. But really the personal, societal, and financial costs of gun violence are too high not to start sensible action. Because of course, is this going to solve everything? No. But we have to take small steps, one at a time, and I think this is an important first one.
Thank you. Dan. Mike.
Yeah.
And then Mike.
This council has historically shied away from difficult questions which didn't involve city policy. So I'm actually ecstatic to see this issue now before the council and the willingness of the council to tackle this issue to the extent that we can. And this really goes to the core of what we are elected for, and that is to lead, to represent our community, to protect public safety, to make sure that somehow on an issue of this critical importance, we can actually make a difference. And it takes one city at a time, but it builds up, and eventually you get a movement. And to see the Moms Demand Action Group and the Mayors Against Illegal Drugs and Handgun Control before that, and other groups that have come out now and are taking a stand and trying to bring some sanity to the gun culture that exists in this country. It's heartening to see that. As Tana, I think, alluded to, there's nothing in here about the Second Amendment. In fact, if you read the proclamation, the only thing that talks about restricting gun ownership is it says keep lethal military-style weapons and high-capacity ammunition magazines off our streets. And there's no question in my mind, at least, that we do not do any violence whatsoever to the Second Amendment by keeping military-style weapons and high-capacity ammunition magazines off of our streets. So I have no hesitation at all in supporting this. I'm confident our council will take the steps that it needs to take on this motion, and look forward to seeing Mercer Island stand in support of this effort.
Mike. Oh, sorry, Mike, and then Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll not support this, and I'll go through the reasons why. Although I would like to say that I do support background checks. And I am against everything illegal. And I'll go back to that over and over so that we don't forget that in the event that my dissertation here, if you will, gets skewed too far in one direction. Councilmember Sin, I'll disagree with you on our number one responsibility is public safety. I think our number one responsibility is supporting the Constitution. And I think we've got some issues here with this Mayors Against Illegal Guns, because I think that it has a very real potential of being a slippery slope argument of where it might go. Councilmember Gross, just so I don't forget, there is, you can't say about the assault weapons and whatnot, because the Heller case, which was recently, and I don't mean to get into a legal argument with you, because, I mean, you'll win on that, I'm sure. But as I understand, the Heller case, which was recently decided, the prohibition is on dangerous and unusual weapons, including automatic firearms, fall outside the Second Amendment guarantee. So it's kind of already done. It's already done. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to give you a little bit of history. The first time I got involved with the council was 2002, when I asked then Mayor Merkel to do a proclamation on West Point's 200th birthday. And I kind of had to work hard for that, and I didn't quite understand, and Mayor Merkel was, well, the council really doesn't like to do that. That is, make proclamations, because we're worried, we're concerned about where it will lead. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, it's West Point, it's mom and apple pie. Why wouldn't we want to ever do that? I think it's just for this exact reason that we're talking about this. My preference being on the council is talking about leash laws, is talking about stop signs, how we're going to replace the streets, et cetera, et cetera. I think what you've done is open up a box, and I don't mean to shirk under the responsibility of making hard decisions, but you're opening the council up to that which should be a united community talking about local issues, leash laws, how we improve our streets, our schools, our sewers, the parks, etc. You've opened up a Pandora's box because as Mayor Merkel in 2002 was concerned about are we going to talk about There's going to be a citizen out there who's just as passionate about illegal immigration, or just as passionate about abortion, or pro-rights, or pro-choice, and go down the list of national issues that we have that can divide a community, and I worry about that with this precedent that we're setting now. I'm a bit torn between your authority to puff out your chest, and I'm the mayor, I'm going to make that decision. I think I don't have an issue with that. Weak mayor, strong mayor, you were elected the mayor through the process that we have. I certainly have made statements and editorials and putting down my title as council member, and not having to, and I have not felt that I needed to preface that or separate myself from the council. I'm a council member. This is what I believe, and I've used that authority and that podium, if you will, to make a point. I'm not really against you exercising that as mayor. That might be a good, Mr. City Manager, that might be a discussion point to have at our planning session. Be that as it may.
I like this. I like the power.
Well, that's why I'm a little bit hesitant about it. It can be a double-edged sword. Let me talk about the Mayors Against Illegal Guns Coalition. Why are we doing this? What is this Mayors Against Illegal Gun Coalition? It wasn't researched too much initially, and it was, 900 mayors have signed it. Well, I guess if 900 mayors have signed it, it must be okay. Well, that's, since 2006, this organization's been in place. 900 mayors, that's less than 3%, according to USGS, less than 3% of the cities and towns in the United States. So it's not it's not for want of resources. I mean, the sponsor of Mayors Against Illegal Guns and Coalition, if he's certainly a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire, Mayor Bloomberg, that is. As Councilmember Sin brings a personal story, I also have a personal story, but I think it's a unique personal story. So when I was in Iraq, one of the things we handed out, to show them the way was the Federalist Papers. Another thing that we promoted was that every household would have 1 or 2 AK-47s. That was a way for them to protect their person and their property. Now, I know what everybody's thinking. That's a far stretch from the United States. How silly should we, get in touch, Mike? This is the United States. Well, I also have another experience. I was first to deploy to Homestead, Florida during Hurricane Andrew. And there, at moments, at times, I get the same spooky feeling patrolling the streets of Homestead that I would in Iraq. Now, believe it or not, when a big city, when you land into a big major airport in a big city in the United States without any lights, it can happen. It can be spooky. Also there, during that deployment, those 30 days, we had situations where the regular Army forces were deployed in the United States. We had situations where our very cool, calm, collective Colonel Smith, who looked more like a grandpa than a commander of an airborne brigade, had said, "Boys, settle down, stand down. These are our people. These are our people. We're there to protect them." But it can quickly change the other way, and that's why we have the Posse Comitatus Act, which I don't quite understand how we deployed and how we deployed to, when I say we, regular troops, because I think the Second Amendment is there for a reason. I look at history, how different World War II would have been with a strong Second amendment in Germany, for instance. How different history may have been. Now, some other points about this. Again, I support background checks. I support background checks, and I support anything. I support things that are illegal. I'm against everything that's illegal. But I think we're simplifying this discussion, and we're looking for something to do. We got to do something. Well, this is something. Let's do it. There are many countries that have very strong gun laws. Russia, Mexico comes to mind. But those countries have very strong murder rates. They have a higher murder rate than we do, even though their guns have all been banned.
Mike, you're at about the 10-minute mark.
Okay, almost there. So this gun situation with violence, it's not just the Second Amendment right, guns. It's mental illness. It's people who have guns who are mentally ill and not taking their medication, and that comes up against the Fifth Amendment. And then it's the First Amendment. You cannot tell me that these videos that kids watch hour after hour after hour, it doesn't desensitize them. I know it does, because the Army will have soldiers watch like videos before they deploy so that they don't hesitate. And with both those issues, I think putting restrictions on all of the people, their rights, their specified right in the Second Amendment, so that mentally ill people won't have, because mentally ill people have access, is the wrong way to do it. The last thing I want to make, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your patience, is this is something that the rules are already on the books. I think the rules are already on the book. It's against federal gun laws to have a gun and to be a felon. It's against federal gun laws to have a gun and to be a fugitive. It's against federal gun laws to have a gun and have a court order because of domestic violence. It's against federal gun laws to have a gun and to have been adjudicated as mentally ill. What I think is happening here is we're reacting viscerally to violence from guns, and what we think is going to fix it are more laws versus enforcing the laws that are already on the books. And then what happens is that you think these additional laws are going to fix the problem, and you do an additional law, another law that doesn't get enforced, and another law that doesn't get enforced, and another law that gets enforced. And then possibly for nefarious reasons, all those laws get enforced, and then we're in a real pickle. Again, I support background checks. I support eliminating the loophole at gun shows. I support that. But I don't support this Mayor Against Illegal Gun Coalition because I know there's an agenda over there more than just supporting background checks. Frankly, I don't trust Mayor Bloomberg, the same mayor who who unconstitutionally restricted the big gulp. If he's going to unconstitutionally restrict the big gulp, I think it's a slippery slope argument with this organization.
Can I make
I support background checks.
Yeah, I'm going to go to, okay, so Mike, you're ceding to Jane for a moment, and then we'll come back to you. Okay.
Well, I didn't prepare a speech tonight at all, but I think obviously this is a very emotional issue. Anytime you mention the word guns, you're going to have an instant polarization in this country, unfortunately. I think what Councilmember Ciro said was true, that we're reacting viscerally, and I think he's reacting viscerally to any attempted restriction on gun ownership. And so, a fear of the slippery slope is how you're reacting viscerally. If you read this agenda bill, the statement of principle says nothing about background checks. It talks only about illegal guns. I am against illegal guns. I'm not against guns. And I think we get it all mixed up sometimes. This, in my opinion, is a very reasonable measure. It is moderate. It does not it doesn't restrict anyone's ability to bear arms. It doesn't restrict do anything about the Second Amendment. It's not anti-gun. It doesn't threaten the Second Amendment, and I think it's very sensible. It targets illegal guns, and that is a huge problem in this country, illegal guns. So I am very happy to support this. I want people to understand that this is, in my opinion, a rather moderate and, to me, easy to accept principle. So I will be voting for this.
Thanks, Jane. Mike, you want to go? Debbie, you're up.
Clearly one of the most emotional issues that I think has come before council in quite a while, and definitely very different than the other ones that have generated emotion, namely I-90, East Mercer Way, etc. First, a huge thanks to the community that showed out to speak on both sides of the story, because it does take a lot of courage, it does take a lot of strength, and something that I think speaks to the hearts and the minds of the vast majority of the United States at this point. When I look at some of these issues, I too have a visceral response, but my responsibilities as a council member go back to the Constitution and to this community. And when I looked at this statement of principles, there's nothing in here that speaks against any element of our Constitution. And in my mind, the Second Amendment is not at risk, is not at threat. Now, that said, there are people who do feel that it is, quote-unquote, a slippery slope, it is a Pandora's box, etc. Now, I would ask us to go back into our minds 150 years ago, when there were certain segments of this country who did not have the right to vote. There were certain segments in this state who did not have the right to marry. There were certain segments in this country who did not have the right to choose to make decisions about their reproductive rights. Now, this community needs to be open and respectful of the debates of these core issues that, in my mind, define America and define the freedoms that we have. We cannot shy away from the discussion. We respect what we have on the books in the meanwhile. So with that said, I support this wholeheartedly. I support this because I do believe it is in line with the Constitution. I do believe it is in line with the important conversation and debate that we need to have at every point in our history over the key issues that determine where we go as a nation.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So that's what we're arguing about, is one sentence. Today's Earth Day, as many of you know, and we're supposed to be out there helping Mother Earth and doing all we can for the planet. And I think we forget that, in the end, we're all humans. And we forget that we share this planet, and we try to do what's best for, as many speakers have mentioned, for the community and for the planet. So my question is, why would I want to own an assault weapon? What would I use that for? Would I go hunting? What would I hunt? Why do I need, volatile magazines? Why do I need bullets that can not only kill somebody but blow them up? Why would I need that if I'm sharing the planet with other humans? Like a fellow council member, I was in the military. I was a pilot in the Air Force. But I don't go out and buy an F-4 and screech over Mercer Island and try to bomb Luther Burbank. Why would I want to do that? I share this planet with you, with fellow humans. I served in the military to defend rights and to defend my community and to defend the planet, and not to make it more volatile, not to make it more aggressive. This isn't a complex issue. You know, I'm not going to dance around this. There's nothing complex, there's nothing less important about it. And people that think that it's not complex, they agree with me. You know, they agree that, you know, in the end, we're all human beings. Why would I want to own, you know, an RPG? Why would I want to own an assault weapon? There's no reason for that. When you look at the statistics, think about this. We lose a Mercer Island and more every year to fatalities from guns. So think about that when you drive home tonight. Every year a Mercer Island is gone, just because of guns. Now think about all of the things you have to do in order to own and register a car. So your 16-year-old's getting ready to drive. Think of all of the steps that they have to go through in order to get a license, in order to be able to drive, to even have other humans in the car with them. It's more stringent in this country to own and operate a car than it is to have a gun. Now, how stupid is that? Yeah, it's stupid. You know, and we're talking about semantics about what's legal and what's illegal. The fact of the matter is, nowhere do I read in the Second Amendment that it says that people have the right to own an AK-47. Why would you want to own an AK-47? What would you do with it? It's frustrating to watch our politicians at the state and federal level dance around this issue and hide behind the Second Amendment, because in the end, as the wonderful pediatrician testified earlier, this is about saving our families, this is about saving our kids, this is about saving our communities. And yes, public safety is our number one job as elected officials and as community leaders. There's no doubt about it. The Constitution is about public safety. That's why it was written. You know, we broke away from Great Britain to be safe. We broke away from Great Britain to stop being persecuted. We have amendments to the Bill of Rights based on all of the persecution we underwent and our forefathers underwent back in Great Britain, and that's why we established the United States of America. That's why we live on Mercer Island. This is one of the most safe communities on the planet. So why would I want my neighbors to own an AK-47? I had to yell at a kid in my neighborhood because he was shooting a BB gun across the backyard. Would I want that kid to have an AK-47? I think the answer is pretty obvious, no. So to me, enough is enough, and to what we can do at the local level to educate our state leaders and our national leaders to the fact that they just aren't getting it. They aren't. And these laws are stupid. In the end, we're all humans. Let's for once show how humane we can be by getting rid of these volatile weapons and making our neighborhoods, our communities, Mother Earth, a safe place to live. Please. And obviously, I completely agree with this mayor's initiative and more. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. My speech is pretty simple. I think this is a good, sensible, small step we can take. I support it. Anyone else? All in favor? I was going to say, I was going to actually read the motion. Supporting the mayor and signing the statement of principles for the Coalition of Mayors Against Illegal Guns, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Motion carries. With that, we will take a break for 10 minutes. Thank you all for coming out this evening, and again, don't hesitate to get involved in other issues. No, I didn't. We're going to try and get started here again. Dan, was Debbie outside? Okay. If it's easy, sure.
I'm in a meeting, I'll have to talk to you later.
Thanks for trying. All right, Deb, we're ready to roll.
You can go.
Yeah, that'd be great. You're hired. You want to just come on up and?
I told her.
Deb, are we on?
I told her once. I'll tell her.
Cue video.
I turned off.
Okay. We're good. All right. We'll come back in order. And we move to Agenda Bill 4832, acknowledging and commending Aubrey Davis's service and renaming the park on the lid to Aubrey Davis Park. And I turn it over to our city manager, Rich Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an item that I am both delighted and actually honored and humbled to bring to you. As you know, former council member and Mayor Aubrey Davis passed away in February, and since I've been at the city now 35 years, he's a name that goes all the way back to when I was very young and knew nothing, but I did know when I saw him sitting up here that there was somebody that knew it all. And he certainly has proven that many times over since. Before you tonight is a resolution to acknowledge and commend Aubrey for his years of service to Mercer Island, to the state of Washington, and in the resolution it has the council renaming the park on the lid to Aubrey Davis Park. Before I go into talking a little bit about that, I'd like to spend just a minute going through a little bit of Aubrey's history. In your agenda bill, I've included actually a very nicely written history that covers Aubrey's life from back when he was a boy all the way through to just very recently. And I won't cover it all because it takes quite a while to get through it all. But important parts of his life that have affected us all. Group Health Cooperative is an utterly unique organization in America, and as many people know, it has been held up as a potential model for how healthcare should be organized nationally. Well, it started here in Seattle, and it started with a group of people with good ideas and lots of energy, and Aubrey Davis was one of them. And as I understand the history, in 1951, Aubrey became an active participant in the Board of Trustees for Group Health. He was member number 239, which I bet when he would take it into any of the clinics and show them the card, they were probably astonished. And as you know, later Aubrey became president and CEO of Group Health and helped shepherd in its years of expansion and structure and reorganization and national prominence. So healthcare was a major success story in his life, but at the same time he had a lot of interest in transportation. The Davises moved to Mercer Island in 1960 and set up shop on Mercer Island, and within a short period of time Aubrey was elected to the council. It says here he won with 67% of the vote. I bet any one of you would love to have those kind of numbers. Clearly he was popular. But about the time that he got elected, the State Department of Transportation announced that they wanted to rebuild Interstate 90 with 16 lanes, literally cutting the island in half, or actually there were options that did cut the island in half, ultimately ended up on the north end. There was going to be a huge land cut through Mount Baker,
It was the old-style engineering project that was not sensitive to neighborhoods, but it was going to move cars. And so he took on that battle to protect his community and protect his island. And what we have today, that design was a radical departure from anything the state had ever designed and built, looking at interstate highways as an opportunity to unite neighborhoods and communities, to create parks and pedestrian pathways and bicycle facilities instead of just moving cars and trucks. It was a complete change in how transportation was thought of then, and it has carried on into the future and has also moved to other countries. And I think we still have the world's largest floating bridge. We have the world's largest soft earth tunnel. I think that's going to change here downtown Seattle pretty soon. I-90 is a linear park from bridge to bridge. We have pedestrian pathways. We have arts and sculpture. But one of the most phenomenal things that we have is a park up on the northwest corner of the island that's actually very close to my house, and I visit it several times a week. It's the Lid. And it did do what it was purported to do. It has joined First Hill to the north and First Hill to the south, and it's a wonderful asset, some of the best views on the island. And so we're going to talk about that for just a second. Let me move on. Aubrey continued on in transportation as the city's representative on the Metro Council that did transit before it was folded into King County. He also was appointed by the Secretary of Transportation, Brock Adams, to run the regional U.S. Department of Transportation, and then later appointed by Secretary Neil Goldschmidt to be the regional administrator of the Urban Mass Transit Administration. He had so much clout in transportation. I remember participating in a number of meetings, now pushing 10 years ago, on the 520 project rebuild and the new bridge and the design. And it was a big public process that had government officials elected and appointed, and public. Probably each meeting had 200 people in the room. And Aubrey would sit in the main table, and he would kind of lean back and his eyes would be closed, and you weren't really sure what was going on with him. And then the most important point in the meeting would come, and a point was needed to be made, a summary of what really needed to happen was being begged. And Aubrey would lean forward, open his eyes, and speak, and there you could hear a pin drop. And this happened every time. He had such presence and vision and could synthesize just enormous amounts of material and come up with the right thing to do. And I watched that happen over and over again, and that it was inspiring, and it's also, I'll never be that good. Ultimately, his career finished with transportation and group health. Aubrey moved to a condominium in Seattle over near the 520 bridge, and your mother passed away a number of years ago, Henrietta. They sold their house here on the island. And we were all very lucky to see Aubrey here just in February when we were talking about Interstate 90 issues. I think it's appropriate for this council to at least consider the resolution and the park on the Lid. I will note that when we built the Lid Park, state built all the infrastructure, the city had to go get a grant fund to build the park itself. It is a city park. And we worked hard, we got the money, and we got it built. And the park board at the time was asked by the city council to name it. So they went out on a naming contest and solicited lots of names from around the community, and big process, and at the end, the winning name was the Park on the Lid. Okay, so much for democracy. I've thought all along, we probably could do a little better, and I couldn't think of any better name than Aubrey Davis Park, Mr. Mayor. Oh, and let me add one more thing. Aubrey's daughter, Judy, and son-in-law, Don Willett, have joined us from Bainbridge Island this evening, and granddaughter, Brenna Willett, who lives here on the island. And I can tell you I've been in touch with the family, and I think they're in support of this idea.
And and please come on up and let us know give us a speech. Come on up. It's obvious everyone else is giving speeches tonight, so.
It's been a great night for speeches. I'm Judy. I'm the eldest daughter, and I actually grew up in Seattle, and they moved here when I graduated from high school, so that tells you how long it's been. But I did live here a little bit. I just want to say you're right, the family is not just in favor, but just really thrilled with this concept, with this proposal. It's important to us. We drive across the bridge and think, oh, there's Dad's lid, or there's Grandpa's lid. But now we can just have the real name for it. Thank you.
I wanted to say that having walked, run, bicycled, and bussed, as well as driving to Mercer Island, seeing what the city has done with the lid and making it a walkable, bikeable community, excellent land use around the area, to have Aubrey's name associated with what the city has done with it, I think is just really special.
And I'd just like to add, as a resident of Mercer Island, I drive by the park on the lid every day. I also pass it as I walk around the island, and I can't think of a more fitting tribute to my grandfather. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, we come back to council, and we have an option of a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 1465, acknowledging and commending Aubrey Davis's service to the citizens of Mercer Island and the state of Washington, and renaming the park on the lid to Aubrey Davis Park.
Second.
Discussion. Okay, Mike.
Well, I want to chime in with Rich because I've been working the transportation issues for, 15 years plus, and that includes the 520 bridge. And Aubrey and I were at many a meeting in many a legislative work group. I think we went through 3 legislative work groups just on the 520 bridge alone. And he would always take me under his wing and tell me, give me the history behind various issues that came up. And many of them were very complex. But he always had the region and the multimodal issues at heart. He really did. And it was just a pleasure to do it. But the funny thing is, when you'd look at him, you'd think, gosh, he's just asleep, and he's really not paying attention, and he really doesn't know what he's talking about. And it was just the contrary. So I share a lot of the same stories. That
He never missed a word.
No, he never missed a word. And plus, he was amazingly high-tech. He kept up with all the technologies, and many don't know this, but, he was, I think even to his last day, has been kind of a test bed for various technologies for how to track where people go, how many miles they use, when they drive. All of that data that WashDOT was trying to put together and continues to do so. So when you hear about VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, he's behind a lot of this study work that went into how do we find a way to finance transportation and make it safe, make it fair for everyone, but yet make it simple. And he had that uncanny ability to take very complex things and boil them down into a simple summary. So this couldn't be a better tribute to him. The last thing I want to mention, and a lot of the public may not know this, but when they were first going to build the I-90 through the north end of Mercer Island, they were going to build just like a normal freeway and have a slope on either side of maybe 1 to 2 or 1 to 4. and the swath was humongous. And thanks to him and a few others, they negotiated the footprint down and then negotiated putting the lids on top. And we are very fortunate to have what we do. There are very few communities in the entire country that have that kind of amenity of having an interstate freeway go through their community, and you really don't even know it, thanks to him.
Jane?
It was Aubrey who said of I-90 original plan, we don't want to see it, smell it, or hear it. And someone questioned me and said, I think it was somebody else. I think it was Ben Werner or somebody else. And I asked Aubrey, and he said, no, he claimed it. He said it. I had the honor of interviewing him last fall in his apartment in or condo in Madison Park, and he would look across and he could see a little bit of I-90 and Mercer Island, mostly looking at Medina and 520, and he said, when I'm gone, you can blame me for some of that, he said. But he used to come over to Mercer Island and get his hair cut, and he loved this community, and he to the very end was very proud of what was happening. He said that Mercer Island avoided a lot of mistakes of bad development, and that he was very pleased to see what was going on in the town center. There's a lot of pressures of development, and he said we've done a good job, and he said he hoped that there would be generations of people who care like he did about Mercer Island to keep it the wonderful community we all love. He was a treasure. I'm so happy to support this.
Okay. Anyone else? Dan?
I guess first the question, Rich. While the name Aubrey Davis means a lot to many islanders, there's probably a few generations of islanders who are coming up now who have never heard of him. And there'll be, unfortunately, many more generations after that who will go up to Aubrey Davis Park and have no idea who Aubrey Davis was. So I think it's incumbent that staff come back and with some recommendation on how we're going to make sure people who go up to the park actually end up knowing who Aubrey was.
It's a great point, Dan, and I have talked with the Parks and Rec staff. They're already poised to develop the park signage that, of course, we would need anyway. But I think what we're thinking is to produce one of the signs like we've got in several locations on the island, is sort of a historical marker with some explanation. We have it down at East Seattle at Calkins Landing, and we did the one down at south end of the island. Remember the site that had the military, and so we're thinking of that. It's got some good history and background, so people will be able to learn in the future who Aubrey was and why he was important to the island.
That's good. And I'll echo what Mike and Jane have already said. I mean, Aubrey was an amazing guy. I remember when I would every once in a while go over to his house when he still lived on the island, and of course Aubrey was not known as someone who kept order in his house, so you'd go in there and it was a little bit of mass chaos, but you also had the sense that he always knew where everything was, and it was just a fascinating man. And the last time I saw Aubrey was when he was here on the island for Youth and Family Services breakfast, which is, I think, the week before he died, and which was phenomenal. The fact that he would come all the way out here to help promote youth and family services on the island, nothing to do with transportation. But it was something that he was asked to do, and even though his health was clearly not what anyone but was not good at that point, he came out here and he sat through the entire breakfast, and he got up and was recognized, and just by being the person who was being honored at the breakfast, it gave it all the more significance. But it was also what Aubrey said to me. Rich and I were talking to him during the breakfast, and he was watching what was going on with the whole I-90 thing, and because it obviously brought back a lot of memories as to what had happened back in the 70s when he was engaged, and And when I took from that, he said to us, he just shook his head and said it really concerned him that people were going to war and were fighting with each other so bitterly. And that what he recalled out of the 70s was that, like what we are seeing now with I-90, that it was critical that we work with our other communities, work with the other governments, and come up with a solution to this that made sense. And that was his philosophy. And it's a philosophy that I hope will guide this council and guide future councils. And by designating such an important part of the island as Aubrey Davis Park, it'll hopefully be a lesson to people as to what he accomplished, not only on behalf of the city, but at Group Health, elsewhere in his life, and what he stood for, the importance of getting involved as a community, in the community, and the importance of no matter what happened, to always maintain his cool and be a leader and strive for solutions which work for people. So I think this is phenomenal, and my only regret is we weren't able to do this while he was still alive. But it's great to have his family here and to be able to recognize them by recognizing Aubrey.
Anyone else? Just briefly, my own comments on this. Rich, I was kind of disappointed you put this together because I came away with this overriding sense of inferiority from reading it. It's like, how could this person possibly do this much? And it's just, it's unbelievable. So that was really the sense I had, is that what a huge man in terms of his contributions. I first met Aubrey, I was doorbelling when I ran for office, and knew that he'd, former commissioner of transportation, but really didn't know anything more about him than that, and knocked on his door and handed him my brochure and was quickly invited in, and he grilled me. His wife grilled me for the next few minutes about my political positions, what I was all about, and I think in the end I passed muster, but it was not what I expected at all. So that was a nice start to knowing who he was. If there's nothing else, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of moving to approve resolution number 1465, acknowledging and commending Aubrey Davis's service to the citizens of Mercer Island and the state of Washington and renaming the Park on the Lid to Aubrey Davis Park, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for coming out this evening, and very good.
Council, I'll do a quick reminder. At the last page of this agenda, Bill, is the notice and invitation to the memorial service on Saturday the 18th at the Paramount Theater at 10:30, and
10:29.
10:29. I'm sorry, you're right, I rounded, and I shouldn't have. That's one time not to round.
And the significance of that?
29 was an important number to him. He was born on the 29th. He got married on the 29th. He was on a ship that was bombed in the Mediterranean during World War II on the 29th. His son was born on the 29th. He died at 29 minutes after.
Wow. Okay.
All right, 10:29 it is.
So I just make the note for the council and anybody in the community that might want to participate. There you have the information. And to the family, I'll be in touch and we'll work out some of the details. Council, I think what we'll try to do is get the signage and everything in place and ready for summer celebration, and then do a dedication at summer celebration. That gives us a little bit of time to work with.
Good. Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you again, and for patiently waiting through a lot of passion around other issues. We move to Agenda Bill 4834, status report on city work plan to oppose I-90 tolling with Deputy City Manager Noel Treat.
Good evening, Noel Treat, Deputy City Manager, with tonight's status report on maybe your second favorite topic now. Tonight's agenda, I'm just going to give you a quick status report, and then we'll open it up for any questions and discussion that you've got. Following sort of the usual format. First, a report on the WashDOT environmental study. I think if I can sum it up, it's sort of to be determined. WashDOT is not clear right now on the timing of their decisions or their process. They don't know when they're going to make an EA versus EIS decision. They don't know when they're going to launch the EAG group. And when we met with them last week, there's some uncertainty now about when they're going to conduct the Mercer Island survey as well. A lot of this has to do with, of course, things that are going on in the legislature that I'll talk about in just a minute, related to some legislation that might dictate which direction they go in the environmental study, but also they face budget issues as well as a change in their leadership. So I think there's a number of factors at play here. Speaking of changes in leadership, we are still trying to see if we can get a meeting with the new secretary. We haven't been able to get that yet, but we're still working on it through a couple different channels, and we'll hopefully secure some time on her calendar before much longer. With the session, that's been very, very hard to do. Litigation strategy, we continue to monitor the Portsmouth litigation. Katie has been in contact with the attorneys in that case, and we'll keep you posted on what we learn when that court reaches a decision. On the state legislature front, there's a number of things going on right now. There's a number of moving pieces, and it's unclear where they're going to land or when they're going to land. First, coming out just today in the House was a proposal for a 3-cent gas tax increase, earmarked to complete the stretch of 520 between I-5 and the bridge landing. It's sort of got a contingency, which is it only kicks in if other funding has not been authorized by July of 2015. So it's sort of seen as, folks were calling it an insurance policy to guarantee that the 520 project would get done if tolling or some other funding source doesn't come into play. So that is in the House. It passed the House Transportation Committee. Now it has to go to the full House. That may happen sometime this week. In the Senate...
Now, that's huge.
Potentially, yes.
That's huge. And that's on top of what Senator King said on the TVW interview, that the gas tax should contribute to the 520.
Right, and there are certainly other members in the Senate that believe that. Right now, there isn't a live bill in the Senate to match up with this House bill, but that is being worked on. So we'll have to see what emerges there. Overall, the steps are, you've got different provisions in the House and the Senate transportation bills and budgets right now. The Senate, for instance, also has a bill authored by Senator Litzow that would require an EIS of I-90 tolling. It would also require a study of alternative funding options. That's in the Senate bill right now, but not in the House bill. The House bill has a mitigation study provision it's the same as the one that we saw a number of weeks ago. And so the next steps are each House of our legislature has to finalize their bills, and then what they do is they sit down and they try and reconcile those into a final bill that's adopted by both houses.
Any feel as far as Representative Cliburn on the 3 cent and also on the Senate EIS?
On the 3 cent, I believe she supported that, but also stated that she thought that tolls were the primary mechanism to fund 520, but that she did support the 3 cent gas tax as an insurance provision. So that's where things stand. Things are constantly changing. Our lobbyist is doing a good job keeping us informed of what's going on and where we might weigh in. So I'll continue to let you know between now and the next council meeting how some of these things turn out. On the federal front, as you know, we sent a letter a number of weeks back to Federal Highways. We received a fairly short and uninformative response. So now we are working with our legal and lobbying team to determine our next steps. We've been in touch with congressional delegation and are working on our next communication with Federal Highways in tandem with one of the congressional offices. So we're going to find out more about that this week and see how that plays out. As you also recall, we've made public records requests from WashDOT related to their records that pertain to their request for federal approval to toll. We got one phase of response, and at Council's request, we've posted that on our website so that citizens can access that and take a look at those documents. We have a second phase that we just received, and we're reviewing those documents, and we'll post those to the web page as well. On the coalition building front, as you know, we've been working towards a regional letter calling for system-wide tolling. study to be undertaken, and with a component of that being that we look at alternative financing options. We've been working with King County, Bellevue, Seattle, and others, and just late this afternoon I did get an email with the final signed letter. That will be sent to PSRC and WashDOT tomorrow. So that's good news. I've forwarded that on to all of you, so you've got that. We'll put that on our webpage as well. Similarly, Sound Cities Association is moving towards a policy position calling for a system-wide tolling study and to look at alternative revenue options as well. So I think over the next month or maybe 2 months, we'll see SCA take a position supporting that same approach. And then finally, to help, at your request, to help sort of guide our work, especially as we go forward and our outreach continues to grow to different stakeholders, we're developing a matrix to help guide our efforts and guide your efforts as we move forward. And then finally, on the public information front and community outreach, we're in the process of planning some island meetings with different community organizations and some small group meetings to help keep people informed, get information out, and we'll be announcing those in the next couple weeks. So that's all I've got. Any questions?
Mike Ciro.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I want to commend you for getting the mayor's letter signed into PSRC and WashDOT. It's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, and thank you. I just saw it on my phone for the first time here in its finished form, so thank you, Noel, for getting that out. I think that's a big piece of coalition work, and so it's exciting to see.
Yeah, so well done on that. I'd like to, an element on there that I don't see that I think I'd like to ask the steering committee to entertain is, one message out there that hasn't been supported with data or articulated out there is the environmental issues with tolling I-90, the environmental issues that we might anticipate. And I'd suggest that we get with NREX on the data that they have available. It's a national firm that happens to be right at Kirkland. And there's some serious environmental implication, which I'm sure Councilmember Grady can elaborate on, which we're missing that message. And I don't think anybody's going to make that message with the supportable data unless it's us. And I think time's a wasting and not getting that thing going. And I'd like the steering committee to, I requested the steering committee look at that and develop that message, that picture, for not only for us, but for the rest of the I-90 stakeholders.
Okay, you want to start there, or did you have?
I think it's okay to start there.
Okay. Noel, you want to try and tackle that one? We've talked a little bit about this
certainly.
With the steering committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good idea, and I think certainly congestion and traffic impacts and emissions are going to be an important component of the impacts that tolling might create. And as you might recall, going back to our EA comment letter, that's one of the areas we push pretty hard on, which is, wait a minute, WashDOT, you need to study the impacts of tolling because you may be creating more congestion from tolling than you realize. It may not actually relieve congestion. So I think we have been, it's an issue that's been on our radar. It's really a question of timing and strategy in terms of when we'd want to hire our own consultant and sort of how we'd want to go about doing that. I think the way we've approached that to date is knowing that the state is going to launch their study, whether it's an EA or an EIS, they're going to have to take on this question of congestion and emissions and what kind of impacts they're going to create. So we were going to wait and see how they scope out that part of their study, let them get some of that work done on their own dime, and then perhaps hire a consultant on our side to help advise us and make sure that we think that their analysis is complete. So that's been the approach we've taken to date. But I do agree that it is an important component of however this does get studied. And now that we might have PSRC stepping in with this broader regional study too, it's certainly something that I think we'll get a close look as we go through this process. As you might know, some of the North Lake mayors, part of the reason they're signing on to this regional tolling study concept is that they've faced with the tolling of 520 a lot of traffic diversion that was not planned or predicted by WashDOT. So that's brought them to the table. So we could see similar things with tolling of I-90, and we need to understand that before decisions are made to actually implement tolls.
So, I might just speak to that briefly. I did have a chance to meet with the governor last week, briefly on a suite of issues, and brought that one up in particular, Mike, because as you may recall, he pushed very hard to get Senate Bill 5802 passed, which was originally had the title climate change in it. Unfortunately, those two words got excised out of the title. But the study is still going to go on in terms of what can the state do to address greenhouse gas emissions, and what can we do as a state to prepare for climate change. And when I raised some of these issues with him about the unintended consequence of tolling I-90, and in particular in diverting traffic to 405, and some of the pinch points at either end of I-90, what that does then is shove congestion into other areas that could be disadvantaged in terms of increased greenhouse gas emissions, increased asthma rates, et cetera, all of which then could bring in EPA into the picture for our environmental impact study, which, quite frankly, is a good thing because we want to be able to do a full scan and analysis of all of the environmental impacts that you brought up. That got his attention, and it was clear that he had not been briefed very well, if at all, on this. So subsequent to that meeting, I know that Secretary Peterson had some phone conversations with other individuals that it was apparent that the governor had talked to Secretary Peterson about this. So I anticipate that a meeting should be forthcoming, probably shortly after the session is over, where we can go through in some detail the information that we found, where we think it's headed, and in particular, if we have data from NREX or other organizations, at least in a cursory manner, we can start to point them in the direction of, it probably doesn't make sense to be looking at this as an alternative when at the same time you're trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions statewide. And one of the reasons that he brought on Secretary Peterson is because she is very astute on the whole climate change issue. She's very knowledgeable on how to green up transportation, having worked with Governor Kitzhaber on many of those issues. So I think we've got the right players in place for us in Olympia, but I agree with Noel, there's a bit of a timing issue. And I think while we're waiting, it's a good time for us to gather a lot of this information, get our fact patterns straight so that we're ready to go once the session is over.
Well, let me just try and clarify. So I think I hear you saying we should jump to a study or to funding a study now. I think Noel's saying the WashDOT's going to have to. WashDOT should be taking this on as part of their work, and we should be making sure that they do. Mike, I wasn't quite sure whether you jump, advise us to hire somebody right now and get to work on this.
It's very uncharacteristic for you, Councilmember Grady. I usually can understand.
Well, yeah,
real clear.
I know. I'll pause this. So let me be more clear. I think there are ways that we can get information without having to formally request it through and use our taxpayer dollars. For instance, a lot of that information has already been compiled, and I think we can find some of it and start putting our fact patterns together now and sharing those with our federal partners and with the leaders down in Olympia. I do agree to wait until there is some definition from the legislature on the scope of the study, and then do a full-blown analysis with multiple working hypotheses, which they would need to do to look at various alternatives. But I do think that there's been enough analysis of this issue to be able to obtain some of that information now and to make a very clear point that there are not only equity issues economically, but there are also environmental issues that push a lot of the greenhouse gas and other pollution-generating devices into communities like Renton, South Seattle, other areas that then bring in the whole environmental justice equation into the EIS. So, in summary, the data is there. I think to what extent we can get our hands on it without spending money and a whole lot of time, we should do that. And then once we do get clarification from Olympia, then we push with both barrels on trying to get a full-blown study of all the impacts.
If I can just inquire, so the data is there, and you think that's in a form where our staff has the time and resources to make sense of it?
That I don't know. But
Well, that's- I mean,
I think the steering committee really needs to develop a strategy for, okay, what data is out there now, and see if we can get our hands on it without spending any money.
Absolutely. I mean, if we can do it on the cheap, then I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably good input. And
Yeah, I think that's very good
We ought to go do that work.
Yes, we should. And so maybe what we scope out is as we're starting to get to a place maybe with the session ending, where we might have an opportunity with the governor or the secretary, we need at least enough information to lay out an initial credible case on congestion and emissions, and we can talk a little bit more offline about maybe where we can focus that. So,
okay,
we can do it.
Anything else?
I guess the last thing I have, this kind of a little bit of left field here, is with Councilmember Grady's announcement, Earth Day announcement, a great asset having him with his contacts back at Washington, D.C. If the steering committee will just look in their timeline on whether it is worthwhile, both from time and expense, on having Councilmember Grady and maybe the mayor going to D.C. and throwing on the charm. Certainly before Councilmember Grady's term is up, in that he's announced that he's not planning on running.
Well, I certainly think that that's likely to be in our future. I suspect the time is not right now, as we've got several steps to get through before, but you point that a man who knows Washington well is a good person to have along on that, and yeah. Charm I'm not so good at, though. Okay, anything else? All right, thank you, Noel.
Thank you.
We move to agenda. Oh no, we don't. We move to an introduction that was going to happen earlier in the evening and didn't. So I've been waiting patiently.
Yes, I apologize. I was going to introduce Ross Freeman, our sustainability coordinator and communications, actually manager, sorry. This is his first council meeting, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to put a face and a name together. You'll see him quite a bit, I think, over the months and years to come. And he's got a list of things to be working on that is a mile long, but he keeps coming back to work each morning, and we like that. And he's wearing green, yes. It's Earth Day. So, Ross, thank you. You don't have to say or do anything unless you've got, a
prepared speech,
10-page speech written.
Moving along. All right. Well, welcome. This will be your easiest meeting other than having to wait patiently for so long.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging in there. And really, if you just we won't even notice if you just ease on out tonight. So you didn't have a speaking part, so you don't have to stay.
Yeah. But welcome. We're very pleased to have you. There's a lot of energy that went into the decision to hire that role, and very pleased to have that come to fruition. So, okay, we move to Agenda Bill 4831, PSE Natural Gas Franchise. Katie Knight.
Good evening, Council, City Manager. I'm enjoying all evening for this particular agenda bill. This is the renewing of the natural gas franchise with Puget Sound Energy. And I want to note that this is confined to how the utility may use and occupy the city rights-of-way for its gas distribution system. The Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission regulates pretty much everything else to do with the natural gas distributed by Puget Sound Energy. That would be the rates, the fees, the reliability, and the customer services. In preparing to renew this gas franchise, which has been over 25 years on the island, we did review other jurisdictions that have recently renewed their franchises with PSE. You'll note that this is a 15-year franchise agreement. They have the option to agree with the city to renew it for 5 years after that initial 15 years. I did want to assure you that our insurance authority has approved the amounts of insurance. We talk closely with them on big issues like this. And I would note that there is a small Scribner's error on section, I believe it's 4.3 of the actual franchise. Line 5 down, I'll just have that removed. It says, it has the word "me" in there, which should be taken out. Shouldn't be in there, and I've read this so many times, I'm surprised I missed that. I'd also note that it may be worth changing the title of the actual agreement to clarify that it's for the continued use of the city rights of ways and the operation of the facilities for the natural gas pieces too, just so that that distinction is made clear when you look at the actual title of the franchise. That's something I could change easily, but I wanted to note that. I have Cody Olson here from Puget Sound Energy, who can answer any other information or questions you might have with regard to the franchise. And other than that presentation, I'm open for questions.
Okay, questions? Mike, and then Tana.
Okay, I had a question. You had, let's see, the non-exclusive franchise agreement is going to be repealed, and the provision of successors and assigns, these are my notes here, and forfeiture of rights of Section 1, that was repealed? I think I read that either on the agenda or...
In the city's codes, if you're looking at Section 1, on Chapter 15.28, it actually codified the previous gas franchise, and that's not something that I would recommend. It's not the sort of thing that you need to have in the actual ordinances itself. We do have, or in the actual code itself, it's obviously in an ordinance form adopting the franchise, but it's something that doesn't need to be codified because really it's the agreement between PSE and the city, and we're the ones who would ensure that it was fulfilled. But it isn't basically a rule or regulation that I would think the average citizen would need to know.
Okay, so it was repealed in our municipal code because it was excess...
That's the old franchise. We're repealing the old franchise by virtue of this ordinance, and then we are asking the city council to have the city manager sign the renewed franchise agreement.
And that will get replaced in our municipal code?
No.
It won't get replaced?
It won't get replaced. The franchise agreement will still exist, but there won't be a place you can look at. Well, we'll have it available. It's a public document, but it just won't be listed or codified in the actual code. It was just a way of cleaning up the code a little bit.
Is it kind of a simplification to say we just won't have it be sort of by look like a law? It'll just be a franchise.
Right. It won't look like a regulation.
When you have it in your code, it's technically a law, and that's kind of clunky to have your franchise agreement in that.
We're working on cleaning up the code from some of this older stuff.
Donna?
Not to put any undue kind of black cloud over PSE, I just wanted to ask, is there anything that we can do in particular to ensure that things like that happen with the Verizon project over by Island Crest Park doesn't happen with PSE, and how does this franchise agreement kind of address any excess damage or elongated activity or project from ruining our streets and things like that?
Right. And you'll see, I have to see what section is, but with regard to obtaining permits, they have to get a right-of-way permit to do work in the street. And I think if you look at Section 7, it talks about if they fail to perform the remedies that we have in the franchise, the permits that we would issue with regard to working in the right-of-way would also deal with that. I worked on the Verizon project too with Verizon and with city staff. It was a really difficult placement of a vault in there, so that was part of the pieces. There were some unexpected pieces that happened along with it. So we've been working to work through that particular issue with regard to Verizon, which is separate. But I believe that this franchise in and of itself provides us with remedies to deal with those situations, and then the permits themselves and the bonding that we would require, just like we required of Verizon, will help us make sure that those issues are taken care of.
Dan?
few questions. Maybe I missed it, but I don't see any, this agreement basically deals with PSE wanting to make changes or improvements to its facilities. Is there something in here which actually obligates them in the first instance to maintain their existing facilities in a suitable manner? I mean, I think of what happened, the tragedy which happened up in Bellingham, where the gas line broke or exploded. I mean, I don't see anything in here which basically creates an affirmative duty on their part to actually maintain their facilities so that minimizes the risk to Mercer Islanders. I see everything about changing them, but I don't see anything about just an obligation to maintain their existing facilities.
I think if you look at Section 4, it deals with the non-interference and maintenance of facilities. And I would note again, I think that goes to the piece that talks about what this franchise grants, which is the rights-of-way. So the piece that the city gets to deal with and the parts that I heavily emphasized were the insurance amounts, but the WUTC deals with the actual facilities themselves. I don't know, Cody, if you had some more information about what requirements you are under, the tariffs and such.
Well, I was basically going, this is Cody Olson with Puget Sound Energy, and thank you so much for having us here tonight for this franchise renewal. And I was going to basically mimic what Katie started to say, and that is that we do have obligations to the WTC, and they do oversee, and we do report to them on compliance and regulatory issues related to those things.
I mean, would there be any reason why you couldn't affirm those obligations to Mercer Island as well? I mean, I'm not saying, if Katie can conclude that the requirements under the WUTC, or the requirements imposed by the WUTC are satisfactory, it would be nice to see something in here which says that, you know, for the benefit of Mercer Island as well, you agree to comply with those requirements. So
I think, let's see, I'll have to find it in here, because we require them to comply with regulation of the laws of the state of Washington, which I thought addressed that. If you wanted us to more specifically put in a paragraph that talked about
where is the requirement they comply with the state?
I think that's in 4.1. If you read that first sentence, which talks about that their facilities shall be constructed, installed, maintained, and repaired within the franchise area, so as not to interfere with the passage of traffic, and in accordance with the laws of the state of Washington and the ordinances, rules, and regulations of the city, not inconsistent with the franchise. I can make that more specific if you felt that it needed more specificity, but again, trying to make that distinction that our ability to regulate this has to do with the use of the right-of-ways. That's what I was focused on. But I can add it a little tighter if you want more.
Well, again, I'm not familiar with what the laws of the state of Washington are in this regard, so it's not, you know, there's a lot in this agreement about what as soon as they want to break ground and touch the facility, there's a whole lot of language in here on what their duties are. But once they finish the work, there's absolutely no language in here which specifically says what their obligations are in terms of maintaining the facilities after that. If you conclude that the laws of the state of Washington cover that sufficiently to protect Mercer Island, then I'm satisfied with that. But it just seemed to me there's a lot of specifics about what they do in a very short period of time, and nothing about what happens after that. So that's one concern I have. The other concern I have deals with Section 5.1 in the beginning, because it says that the PSE is obligated to apply for all necessary city permits to do work, and shall, except to the extent inconsistent with the terms and conditions of this franchise, or where expressly provided otherwise herein. they're required to comply with all the requirements and conditions of such permits. So I was trying to, in fact, if you look at that sentence, it says they're required to comply with all requirements and conditions of such permits, federal and state laws and city codes, ordinances, et cetera, et cetera. But there's this big exception in the middle of it. It says, except to the extent inconsistent with the terms and conditions of this franchise or expressly provided otherwise herein. So I was just trying to go through this thing and determine for myself what that exception might refer to. And I found one section where it might refer to, which I was hoping wouldn't be that. But so I'm curious from your standpoint, Katie and Cody, if you've got any thought on it, what that exception is supposed to refer to.
My thought was that it was supposed to refer to the pieces where they had to look to state law or to their needs for doing the actual facilities themselves, which again is governed underneath state law and the WTC and the state tariffs. But for the most part, keeping in mind what our specific control is over here, it has to do with the rights of way and what our permits allow them to do. So I would think for the most part that the permits are going to control with regard to the rights of ways, and that if there was a specific issue that came up, we have other I'll have to go back and look in here, but we have other issues in here too where there's lots of intent that there be conferences between the city and Puget Sound Energy. So I'm trying to think of a situation where...
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I'm trying to, this, I don't mean to play lawyer here, but it says, except to the extent inconsistent with the terms and conditions of this franchise or where expressly provided otherwise herein. So it's not referring to state law there. It says, there must be some provision in this agreement which is supposed to create an exception to this requirement. And the one that makes me concerned, to be honest with you, I told you this before the meeting, is the first sentence of Section 4.2, which says any repair of PSE's facilities within the franchise area must be made within the time and in a manner which conforms with generally accepted customs, practices, and standards in the industry. So if I was being a creative lawyer, I would say that that's a provision which, if PSE can sit there and say, well, the standard in the industry is that instead of putting 3-inch pipe in, you put 2-inch pipe in, and even though the city code says you got to put 3-inch pipe in, that now, since the standard is 2-inch, then that trumps the city's requirement, and which, of course, would not be the result you'd want to see. So I'm trying to understand why that sentence is in there, because personally, I would much prefer getting that exception out of there and make it very clear that they've got to comply with city requirements.
2 points. I think in 5.2 where it talks about an emergency, which where they are expressly accepted from having to go get the permit in like they normally would if in fact that there is an emergency. So that would be a reason where the franchise agreement in and of itself says you don't have to deal with the permits. The second piece being when you talk about that section 4.2, it says any repair of PSE's facilities, and the definition of facilities talks about, if you look on page 5 actually of the exhibit, facilities means the natural gas distribution systems, and again, the city does not have control over those actual systems. We have control over their use of the rights of ways for that systems. That's why I suggested the change in the title to the agreement.
So say that again. So you're saying that, so if they have to get a permit which talks about, for example, how deep the trench has to be, presumably that would be one aspect of the permit? Or
presumably.
So that's dealing with the facility, obviously. It's not, are you saying that's separate from the facility as to...
I think then you're talking trenching, you're talking those
definitions. But isn't that part of the permit? I mean, isn't that, I mean, it's how they, you know, if they...
I don't, there's nothing in here that would preclude PSE from following the city standards, policy, and permit conditions. That would be PSE if there was, we would even welcome that kind of regulatory oversight in a permitting condition and policy from a normal city staff regulatory process, but to put put everything that you might consider policy or standards of every kind into a franchise to make sure everything's covered would really burden the document. It's meant to be an operating right contract.
I understand that, but I would much prefer, I mean, I thought you had mentioned 5.2 when you got around to that, but I mean, I wouldn't mind making 5.1 subject to 5.2, but to have that huge exception sitting there, which I don't know what exactly it means, that concerns me. So, I mean, if you wanted to say except as otherwise provided in 5.2, I think that makes sense, but I do have a problem with the breadth of the exception, the way it's worded now in 5.1. So that's, I mean, that would be something I'd like to see changed.
Dean, do you have other points of correction?
No,
that's the reason I'm asking is because does it make sense to have you and Katie caucus before the next meeting and come back with a redlined version of this at the next meeting? Because we're going to it's going to be a challenge, I think, to get language changes here on the fly that are going to
plus Katie would need to talk with her counterpart at PSE. I mean, Cody, I don't assume you're not a lawyer, so
They have, I can't remember his name, Mike Barrett? Greg Mackey.
Katie, does that sound like a reasonable approach to you? I don't want to force a direction here, but I think the rest of us are not engaging at this level. And
this is fun. I don't know why. Damn, we have a good time.
Okay. Well, Tana, go ahead then.
Okay. I do have one more question. Given the issue with the box at the intersection downtown and town center, and reading section 4.2, when we talk about in the event of an emergency where the facilities within the franchise area are otherwise in a condition to endanger the property, life, health, or safety of any individual, they'll take all reasonable actions to correct the dangerous situation. I'm just wondering when we consider something a dangerous situation, such as at the intersection in town center, versus the PSE considering something to be a dangerous condition, how is that resolved? And would this be the time to possibly address that?
So I'll note that that is not the gas franchise. So that's a separate issue.
Okay.
And that's a different issue. And it's my understanding that the majority of the gas facilities are already in place, and as far as I know, that there was no near intent to do anything drastic with those. Is that correct, Cody?
Correct, with the gas facilities.
Okay. So, but I did, that is a distinction. That's a different franchise. So.
Okay. Yeah, different PSE's franchise.
Correct.
Thank you.
It is, but I mean, I guess I think the question of were a similar situation to occur within the gas franchise, how would we reconcile difference of opinion, which I guess is what that amounts to from a perspective of city staff versus PSE staff regarding a situation that we're disagreeing on whether it's a good design or a good situation.
So the difficulty here is that there's a lot less control over the city because, again, this franchise deals with the use of our right-of-ways. To the extent that there was something that was a dangerous situation, we'd have the ability to go to the WUTC as well and say, look, we think this is a really dangerous situation. In terms of if they're using our rights-of-way and there's something dangerous about what they're doing there, absolutely we'd have control over that by virtue of the permit, by our standard laws and regulations and such too, so we could shut down anything if we thought what they were doing on our rights-of-ways was inappropriate. But in terms of what would be a dangerous condition, again, they're subject to greater control than to the state's control. So there's different avenues to get there. If you're looking for something in the body of the agreement, that's you're talking about state authority versus city authority. So there's that balance there we're trying to strike. I don't know if you have a different.
Just one, and Mayor.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
And Mayor Bass, I wasn't really prepared to speak too detailed relating to the switches. I know what you're talking about. one piece of information that might be really helpful is to realize that those switches are on a private easement, so it's actually not really a part of this franchise discussion in the sense of public right-of-way.
Okay.
But I think when we got to that discussion, particularly on those switches, and I think the analog to on the natural gas side is if PSE were putting in a facility and we believed it not to be safe, and we got into a disagreement over that, our avenue is probably first to go to the WUTC and get them to agree that the tariffs that PSE is beholden to include a different kind of facility or a more safe facility. That's where we go. We'd have to go to the state to get them to agree. And if they didn't, I don't know, then you probably have to go to court.
If they were putting it in, if they were in the midst of putting it in and we thought it was an issue, we could pull permits and such too. So there'd be a little bit more immediate ability. If there's something more long-term that we thought was a concern, then we would go the route the city manager described.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else right now? Okay, so we're going to send this back for some further work with Councilmember Grouse, and we'll see it again in the
second reading on next council meeting. Is that what I'm hearing?
If that suits you.
That's fine. I'm looking forward to a 10-minute or less.
I think consent calendar for the next one.
Consent?
Yes, please.
All right, rock and roll.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Cody. Okay, we move to Agenda Bill 4833, City Manager Selection Process Continued. Discussion, no presentation. I think this one is mine to tee up. So we reached a bit of an impasse at our last meeting, if you recall, and in the past days trying to sort out a way to perhaps move us forward. You'll recall that there was discussion of an internal process versus an external search process. One person raised the idea of just targeting a select candidate, and we were all a bit dancing around that, trying to figure out how to word our comments and where to go with it. I thought the easiest thing to do might be to actually poll our potential internal candidates and see whether there were any, and whether there were might be more than one. So I today, in fact, spoke with our police chief. I spoke to our finance director. I spoke to our youth and family services director. Spoke to our maintenance director, parks and recreation director, and our deputy city manager, and our city attorney. I also talked to Rich about qualifications for the job. So the minimum qualifications one would expect for this position. And it all boils down to we have one internal candidate, our deputy city manager. So Noel has expressed interest, and what I've heard from all of the other folks I've spoken with is thank you very much for asking, but no thank you. And in their second sentence is generally, if you're contemplating Noel, I think he'd be terrific. But that is the way those conversations went today.
We can't do a draft ad movement?
Oh, yes, we could. We could. So with that, I think the first thing that allows us to do, I think, is to speak in the concrete about an individual candidate rather than an open process, and I think that's helpful to us. But as I thought further about, there are a number of different steps that we would have to go through from here, regardless of which avenue we take. But there is one potentially fairly small, rather bite-sized step we could take now, and I wanted to propose that to the council. And that is that what we could do is arrange an executive session, perhaps at our next meeting, at which time we would interview the deputy city manager, Noel, and get a better sense amongst our council members of what he has to say, what his direction is, and how he responds to our questions and thoughts on the whole role. We could also, at that time, interview other staff members if we chose to. The conversations I had, I thought were illuminating, and I'd like to have other council members have the opportunity to hear from staff as well. And then thirdly, we could have an executive session discussion with just the council to talk about how we felt Knoll stacked up against our expectations and whether we wanted to go forward with that. Next step at that point being probably to set about the process subsequent to that meeting of having me and others potentially begin a contract negotiation, if that's the direction we choose to go. So what I would suggest is before we dive into broader search, it may make sense to have an interview at the next meeting. And so I would propose that, and that's as much speechifying. 2 speeches for me tonight. That's about 2 more than I normally do. I turn it over to you guys to respond to that or send us in a different direction. So, anyone? Yes, Dan, I would have recognized you with just a wave.
You're going to hit the floor now. No, I think that makes good sense. I think it gets us out of the box that we were in last time, where we were thinking there might be additional internal candidates, and allows us to at least do a candid discussion with Noel, and also get the input of the other staff members who have worked with him, and then the council can then make an informed judgment as to whether we want to proceed down that road, or if something happens during that interview which persuades the majority of the council that we don't want to go in that direction, then we still have ample opportunity to start an executive start a search outside the city staff. So I think that makes great sense, and would encourage the council to go down that road.
Okay, others? I'm talking a bunch right now.
I agree. I think that's the step we should take. It's good for the mayor to have canvassed the other directors to see if there was an interest, so we made that step, and we know we have one strong candidate, and I think the steps you describe are a good approach.
Wow, okay, well, Mike.
I think it's a reasonable approach. I've been pushing for, as open a process as possible for the public. So I think one of the things that we can explore would be the terms of kind of a probationary period per se. So that if we make a decision now on Noel, for instance, that we have some period of time for which the current and future council can do an analysis of his performance, and then if at the end of that the council deems to have a more wide search for other candidates, then that gives them the ability to be able to do that. So I think in terms of an interim step, I think it's a good one.
And Rich, I'll let you claim your language here. We struggled, I talked with Rich a bit about this, and do you label, if we go down this path, you label it interim, or do you label it probationary? And Rich had a better idea than both of those, and so
Well, I guess when Bruce asked me that, I urged him to talk to you in terms of if you want to have, for example, a one-year period, that you just simply refer to it as city manager that is on a one-year contract, without giving any connotation to probationary or interim, any sense of less confidence or stature in the organization. For the time period that the next city manager has the job, you have to give them, they're the CEO of the organization. You can't have one arm tied behind their back. If you say city manager with a one-year contract, it's an understanding between the two that after 1 year there will be an evaluation and choose to do something different. But for that time period, they are the fully enfranchised CEO of the organization.
So, Debbie.
In thinking about this over the weekend, I went back to some comments that a former mayor of Mercer Island made and said, he always looked at a decision, what is the best for the city, or what are the most important issues and what is then best for the majority of the population. I thought that was a very good approach. And applying that criteria here, what was first and foremost very important to me, in addition to that criteria, was to understand what I think is a very broad pool of qualified candidates within the city was thinking and feeling. So I thank you, Mr. Mayor, for having that conversation. It certainly made it easier. So I am in support of this direction that we're taking. Again, I would also reiterate that I think that this does afford the community some great opportunities. One, to keep and retain the current path we have with so much of the I-90 work that's going on, and keep that, and in fact, in some respects, elevate it to city manager, as we know that Rich is going to leave. I'm sure we could try to talk him out of that one, but I think he's also very determined to go. So I feel very good about that, but I also would want to encourage any of the other directors, should they change their mind in the next week or so as they realize what an exciting opportunity it could be, that they would definitely speak up. And again, I wouldn't want to see us indirectly limit the public's perception of the next appointed city manager or his own sense of our confidence in him, or should it even be at some point a her, by using probationary or trial or limited. And I just go back to recalling that the city manager does serve at the will of council in any context, in any regard. So whether it's 1 year or even 5 years, there's always a mechanism there for us to make changes mid-course.
Okay. Mike?
Mr. Mayor, I kind of have a process question. The city attorney can explain to me the transparency aspect of this, what we are allowed to talk about behind in executive session.
And I thank you for asking that. This is something I've had a conversation with Katie today about, too, and wanted to make sure we were headed the right direction.
In executive session, you can have a conversation about a public employee, so everything that the mayor has described is completely in the context of what's allowed with the executive sessions. The piece that would have to come out would be if whatever city manager is approved, that the contract and the terms and the compensation would have to be identified in open public session. So any decisions that came out ultimately of the executive session would come out in open public session. Let me put it a different way. There'd be no decisions made in the executive session that wouldn't be identified out in open public session. That wouldn't be allowed otherwise. Does that make sense?
But, I mean, if your concern, Mike, is making sure the public can weigh in on this, I mean, there's nothing which precludes us from, as part of whatever process we adopt, to let the public comment on Noel as a potential city manager. So we can create the process any way we see fit, but I think there's certain parts which make sense to an executive session, and certain parts.
No, that wasn't. I was just curious. Certainly didn't want to cross over the line. I was just kind of thinking as I was listening to the mayor talk about this, as the flaws of democracy. We're talking about so much of a personnel issue out in the public. It makes our job difficult, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, you know that when they wrote the Open Public Meetings Act, and actually my father had a hand in that, they very specifically exempted this area for elected bodies so that you could hire your chief executive officer and go through a deliberative process and have it be confidential to protect both the interests of the public and the interests of the candidate. And as Katie says, any decision that comes out of that ultimately has to be codified and done in public. But the deliberative process is very intentionally done behind closed doors so that you can have an open and frank conversation about an employment relationship.
I mean, I just kind of wonder, all the discussions that we've had on the dais, if we couldn't have had that in executive session.
I think potentially we could have, but...
No, because you wouldn't be talking about a public employee necessarily.
No, I see, because it's process rather than...
The exemption is about the public employee, and you have one.
Correct.
Okay. Donna?
It's funny, before the meeting, I asked Rich if we could use names, or if we should use titles, or if we should just allude to people, and I was glad that pretty much everybody else answered my question.
Cannot
Yes,
be named.
exactly. So that was it. So I was glad to see that. I think I was the bottleneck in particular at the last meeting on this issue, and I think I was all for a broad search. And if you had asked, if we talked about this issue back in November, I think, that would have been kind of slam dunk for me. And I think as we were looking at, once the tolling issue came up and the kind of the big city issue had, rapidly moved from, kind of concerns about past lawsuit issues and moved rapidly and importantly towards tolling. And I think that with that in mind, I think this is a great step to interview Noel and to do what you suggested, Mayor Bassett, and because we've seen him, he's familiar with Mercer Island. I'm not going to speak to him, but I think even with the rigorous vetting process, where we won't get distracted by, if all goes well during the vetting process, we'll be able to move forward and continue to focus on tolling as the main issue for the island, in addition to the funds that we've been spending significantly on tolling. That was kind of an unbudgeted and very large expense. I think also with a wonderful candidate internally, if that works out, then we're also doing well being able to focus our funds on fighting tolling. So I think this is a good step.
Okay. I think I've heard, so let's just do a quick, everybody, those in favor of Noel interview, Deputy City Manager interview, next council meeting. Okay, very good. Thank you all. We move to other business. Council member absences. Any new absences upcoming to report? Everybody's here tonight. Planning schedule. Rich?
Well, okay, we moved the PSC thing to consent for next meeting. You can see the last item I have there we dispensed with tonight, so we actually do have a little room on that agenda. May 20th, I'm not sure why we're going to do summer celebration fireworks permit twice, but it might be fun. That was a Larry request. Mike, you asked for that? I get to make that point twice. You get to vote no twice. Yeah. So no, I don't have any adjustments here. We're finding ways to manage through the year. Tana called this afternoon and asked why we're having such cream puff items on the agenda, and I said we'd probably find some more. Actually, tonight turned out to be nothing but interest, so we're doing our best to keep you guys entertained.
I'm going to do that litigation review.
Yes, we've got that on here for July 15th. Okay. We probably will have to come to you for a specific issue to just brief you on before then, but a broader, just multi-topic then we'll do in July.
Reminder about Citizen of the Year?
I have not forgotten. It's a sticky note on my computer that just every morning stares back at me. I gotta get it done.
You know, on that Citizen of the Year, I'm sure we're going to do pictures. We still have, we're missing pictures from Horn and, who else was that? Marguerite.
Yeah, that was the, it wasn't Citizen of the Year. It was sort of lifetime achievement.
But that was one of the agreements, I think, that we had.
Okay. Board appointments. So, you should have each seen this. It's not exactly a board, but it's a committee that we're putting together. And thank you all for the input that you gave. As far as potential members for that, I think I captured the majority of those folks and have as I mentioned here, it was a bit of a, what do I do first? Do I try and get you to agree to people, or do I talk to the people first and see if they're actually interested? My notes here will point out that for some folks there were complications. Richard Ferry was somebody who I had in mind. A couple other folks had him in mind because of the way he seemed to speak for a community and speak thoughtfully. Unfortunately, he has recently moved off the island, so that...
Because of the parking on the Mercer?
That's right, yes. No, his wife has health issues, and he was very, I would say, sad about having to move off. So that was one of the conversations I had. So as long as you folks are all comfortable with this, I would like to ask staff to proceed. There are two other people who I have calls out to but have not heard back from. I would not name them here since I don't know whether they're interested or not, but assuming you don't feel that you really need me to bring them back here, I'll go ahead and just add them into the group. So, all right, everybody okay with that? So Rich, over to you, and take that away. Other board appointments. Deb, our process continues apace, I assume, but we're not ready for those other candidates for the various boards and commissions yet.
No, the applications continue to trickle in, but it's a slow process, and the deadline's May 1st, so we'll see what we end up with at that time.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Councilmember reports. Mike Grady, you want to start?
I've already given mine.
Okay.
The brief meeting with the governor, so hopefully we'll end up with a meeting with the Secretary of Transportation here soon.
Very good. Debbie? No? Jane?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a heads up. King TV was on the island today for Evening Magazine doing a little piece on secrets of Mercer Island. So watch for Evening Magazine. It's going to air in May. I'm not sure the date yet, but secrets of Mercer Island. I'm not telling. Did you tell them? I'm not telling. Tune in and watch. Tune in.
Dan?
I attended the Suburban Cities Association meeting as Tana was unavailable. But it was the first time I'd gone to an SCA meeting, and two observations. One, I really think it was a good decision we made to rejoin the organization. And second, it is very interesting to me to watch the dynamics of that organization, because there are, I don't know how many, 20, 25 cities that are members of that?
About 36.
36, and it's a very open discussion that goes on among the cities, and it's an opportunity when you have an issue like I-90. It's a great forum to be able to talk to the other cities, a lot of small cities around the region that we otherwise don't have contact with, and it is a very good opportunity. And at the meeting, as Noel reported, Suburban Cities is very interested in making sure that the regional transportation issues are being addressed, and I think we'll end up adopting at its next meeting or the meeting after that a resolution which is entirely consistent with the approach that we've been pushing for in terms of a regional study and alternative approaches to funding transportation needs. So it was encouraging.
Thank you. Tana? No? Mike? Okay, circling back to myself, I attended Leap for Green last weekend. It was unfortunately a chilly, windy day, and there were a lot of food vendors kind of huddled outside, other folks huddled outside, quite a few folks inside, and happy to be there where it was warmer. But it was a nice event, and great to see that continue. I also have been, as Mike pointed out earlier, we had a Mayors of Lake Washington meeting, and a lot of conversation that's gone on subsequent to that. And to put this in context, this Moving Washington Forward effort that has resulted in this letter to the legislature and at the press conference, Mayor McGinn and Mayor Priest from Federal Way had folks meeting for over a year to get to the point where that letter came together with signatories on it. The Mayors of Lake Washington letter that is now in your inbox came together in less than 2 weeks. And the fact that these other cities supported us the way they did with such fast turnaround is, make sure you thank those cities when you bump into their elected officials. It was impressive that they did that. In particular, thanks to the county for Diane Carlson's work and helping to actually be the person who coordinated all that and put it together. So it's the letter is as all these things are, a compromise. It reflects a position that's not solely our position. It's the position of these many cities and many people that make up that coalition. So it's not exactly what we might wish for, but I think in terms of building a coalition that can speak to things that we care about, it ends up being a good job and a pretty powerful statement put together in very short order. So I was pleased to be a part of that, and again, urge you to thank other folks as you bump into them. That's all I got. Rich, you got anything?
Yeah, I just tagging on to that. I'm sure you guys all know, but it should go with saying your mayor has been working very hard on I-90 stuff, and he's doing a great job. I've seen these things, well, many of you have over the years. This is not easy stuff, and Bruce is doing a great job.
And see, you doubted whether or not we could.
I did. I'm first to admit, this was going to be an issue like we haven't had in decades, and was going to be remarkably tough we weren't going to find a lot of friends. And so far, we're finding more friends than I thought. Yeah. And Bruce's style is a lot about that. It's a very positive, open style, and people trust him.
Well, and I forgot to mention, it did come up in the meeting with the governor, and we did not have all the signatures on the letter yet, but I did share it based on a conversation that we had, and it found its way to the Secretary of Transportation, and it definitely got their attention, so nicely done. Great.
Was it Bruce's style or the letter?
All right, we're on a high note here. We're calling this a meeting before it goes downhill. All right, thank you all.
Bruce has been invited to ours.
We're going to name a park after you.